What is happening out there, rotoscouts baseball fans? How you guys doing? Happy Friday. A little Friday afternoon action. Larry C says I'm going to blame poor Joker again for starting the show 2 minutes late. Larry's on me for the time lately. I don't know what's going on with Larry. He's been checking that watch. He must be a busy guy. Make sure he's here every day. I appreciate him being here, but man, he is a taskmaster with making sure this show starts on time. What's going on, Larry? What's going on, Dennis? Stephen B in the chat. We got everybody trickling in, I'm sure. Got the old Discord is going off like crazy the last few minutes. I don't know what you guys are talking about in there. I haven't been in it most of the day. Saw a lot of good conversation about utilizing specific lineup positions for DFS purposes. God knows what they're talking about in there right now, but I'll take a peek in there in just a second. I'm going to get my placeholder lineups loaded up now so that I don't encounter one of those situations where I've talked about this slate till 6:15 and then don't have any lineups ready to go for it. So bear with me while I put these in. Got the confirmed lineups loaded. We've got all the home run picks, the power index, the stack tool is all updated on the site. Got the article written. Was kind of worrying if I was going to be able to do that. Raise your hand if you accidentally slept till almost noon today. That was me. So got up a little bit late. Thought I would be behind the curve. We kind of, I didn't short shift it in terms of, what the content is. But I think I used fewer words than I normally do. Kind of tried to breeze through it in an efficient fashion. So we got it all posted. It's all done. Oh, Larry, I know you're just screwing around, buddy. I'm only teasing you right back. But I know you're not actually concerned with a 2-minute late start. Looks like we've got Could Be Travis in the chat. Happy Canada Day. Didn't know it was Canada Day. Damn it. I actually, just before the show started, I have a bottle of Canada Dry Ginger Ale in the fridge that I bought at the deli earlier, and I was going to drink that, but instead I went with the full cup of coffee, so I could have jumped in on theme with Canada Day. Damn it. Oh well, had I known. But I'm doing good, Travis. Good Friday so far. Like I said, kind of slept in and then just been rocking and rolling through baseball coverage the last few hours. Ended up going to see Dial of Destiny last night, like I planned. I went a little later. I was originally talking about, trying to get out in the afternoon, catch the matinee, not all that busy, etc., etc. But got there for like the 7:30 show, I think. Wasn't overly, it was crowded. It was full, but it wasn't crazy packed. Like, had an open seat next to me, which I like. And put a little popcorn up there, have a little bit of space. Don't have somebody breathing on me, whispering things in my ear, laughing at the wrong things, talking about it, breaking out their cell phones. So it was good. I enjoyed it. I'm happy to report that I enjoyed the movie end to end. It was a lot of fun. Certainly wasn't Raiders. Like I was expecting, we talked about that yesterday. Wasn't expecting Raiders, didn't get Raiders, but a good send-off. It was a fun ride. Not a great movie, but a good movie, an enjoyable time with my old pal Indiana Jones. So I was happy to do that. Stuck around in the end for that, one last shot of that John Williams score. I think it's the last movie John Williams is ever going to do. I'm pretty sure that he announced that. So had to stay there for one last blast of that score, just on the big screen with the big sound and everything. July 1st is Canada Day weekend. All right. So this weekend is Canada Day. All right, right on. All right, let's dive into this thing. We got a lot of games to talk about. 12-gamer. Good-looking slate. I think it's more geared toward bats. There are good pitchers on this slate, but it's a lot of couple really good pitchers and then some like low-end. Oh, yeah, Fanatic brings up a good point. Rip to Alan Arkin, man. That guy was awesome. Yeah, that sucks. 80-something. Had a good run, got up there, late 80s, I think, but or mid-80s. But yeah, that sucks. Big loss. He was a phenomenal talent, just so deadpan and funny and just amazing, and an incredible actor on top of it. And he produced a lot of stuff, did a lot of stuff in the background. Larry C says 89. All right, yeah, so that was up there. So he had a good run, but yeah, that's a bummer of a loss for the old Hollywood crowd. But yeah, getting into the slate. So I think it's like, you've got kind of a mixed bag of like a lot of mid-range Dean Kramer kind of pitchers. A lot of guys who are like third, fourth starter caliber, but some upside, some potential. A lot of guys who are priced appropriately for being at that level, and kind of a lack of premium aces. There's a couple of them. There's a couple really good options on the slate, but not many. There's a kind of a mixed bag of quality. So I think we spread out through a lot of that mid-range. We obviously grab, big portions of the highly projected pitchers, and one of them's in this game with Pablo Lopez going. But I think there's a good argument to be made for spreading out a lot of pitching shares through that mid-range. It's kind of a slate. I wrote it twice on the site in different spots. It's a slate that's broader than it is tall, I think. I think there's a good opportunity for a lot of these different, mix and match type pitchers to come through with value today. And we've got a lot of extreme spots for bats. There's a Coors Field game that's in play, obviously, but that's between the Tigers and the Rockies. We've got a few teams that aren't playing at Coors Field that are totaled higher than the teams that are playing at Coors Field. So I think it's going to be one for power. I think it's going to be one for bats. We're showing a lot of power and upside for the Braves, the Dodgers, the Angels. A lot of good spots to go with 5+ implied totals on the board. So I think it's a slate that'll be one with bats. We want to, kind of spread out bats always, and then kind of dictate with, how things fall together with how the pitching slate looks. And for me, this is one where I think I'm going to be broad spread on both. So getting into it, first game on deck, the Twins and the Orioles. Pablo Lopez, not to bury the lead on Lopez, he's obviously sitting there with a big projection on the board in front of you guys at 39.58. Projecting as my second highest overall pitcher of the day. 30.1% strikeouts for Pablo, 3.44 xFIP, a 4.41 ERA. Has been up and down a little bit this season. Has not been as deadly good as he was to start the year in his recent starts. So there's a lot of, the early hot start baked into those numbers still. But overall for the season has been pitching very, very well and is in a somewhat favorable matchup here against the Orioles. The Orioles are good. But I think he's in this current form. I think he's just been a little bit better. So it's been a few blips for earned runs in recent outings, but at the price with the potential upside, I think there's a lot of opportunity here. And I don't think he's going to be all that highly owned. So I like the spot for Lopez at 99.95. You get decent quality in the Orioles. They're not all that easy to strike out, but a few of their key bats do have elevated strikeout rates. So like a guy like Gunnar at 30.5, a guy like Santander 23.6, O'Hearn, Hayes, both in the mid-20s. Rushman and Cedric Mullins are both difficult to strike out up top, of course, but the gain in the average from a guy like Adam Frazier down the bottom of the lineup at 11.8. Anthony Bemboom sliding into the lineup as the backup catcher at 14.3 cuts the strikeout rate average that we're seeing on the screen there. So I think this is a little deceptive. The truth is probably more like mid-20s, and it just feeds that opportunity for him. We know that this ballpark has been limiting power over the last couple of years. There's still no Ryan Mountcastle in that lineup. It is a good Orioles lineup. I will have a few shares going back the other way, but they're not totaled very highly in Vegas. I think there's good reason to not consider them as a high priority option here and to get to some shares of Lopez. If I am going to the Orioles, I'm looking Cedric Mullins, Rushman, Santander. Those are the obvious names in the top three spots. Ryan O'Hearn gives you value in the cleanup spot. He's not a 308, 348, 542 hitter with a 45% better than average mark for run creation, but who is? It's a difficult thing to pull off. At 3,500, 2,600, he doesn't have to be that guy to give you value from the left side. First base and outfield eligible. It's a playable part in this lineup. Hayes and Henderson, two premium bats. Hayes has been very, very good for them this year. Went from like a above average guy with some power in the mid 260s to having an outrageous season at the plate this year so far. 314, 355, 498, 36% better than average creating runs, 8 homers on the season. Nice little year for Austin Hayes, and he's still cheap, 39, 29 in the outfield. That's an easy buy, hitting 5th. Don't mind that at all. Gunnar Henderson, obviously turning into a star before our eyes. 11 home runs on the season, 25% better than average now creating runs. Got his hit tool in check. Has still walked at an aggressive rate. Still strikes out a lot because he's looking for those walks. A lot of that is not swinging strikeouts. So Henderson's a star, 4,700, 3,300, third and shortstop on both sites. Urias, Frazier, Bemboom to round things out. Minor shares of Urias and Frazier maybe as a mix-in. Bemboom is the dead minimum on DK at catcher if you need a super cheap catcher. It's not a great spot. You don't want to go to him many times instead of Adley Rutschman too in this lineup. And then you don't want to go to him over guys like Rutschman on his own team, then Will Smith, then Sal Perez, and all these other premium catchers that we've got in play. Jonah Heim, Mitch Garver, even Jeffers on the other side of this is a playable catcher. So I don't know how many times I want to go to Bemboom in the 9 spot, but he's there at the minimum if you need him on DK. On the other side, the Twins have been feeding strikeouts to starting pitchers pretty much all season. This confirmed lineup, 28.9% strikeout rate. That's pushed up by guys like Joey Gallo at 40%, but it's not like that's a small sample, 210 plate appearances, and we know that Joey Gallo strikes out at that kind of an aggressive rate. 92 plate appearances, you could argue that Royce Lewis's 28.3% is still in a small sample, but he doesn't really walk, seems likely to strike out at least around that level for now, has been a good hitter, 318, 348, 477 is productive, but just like all their other key hitters, he strikes out a lot. So I think that feeds a little bit of upside to Dean Kramer at 81-87. He's obviously a better play on DK as an SP2 at 81, but I think you can get away with Kramer at 87. He's pitched fairly well this year, 4.50 ERA, 4.36 xFIP. Doesn't really walk anybody, 5.9% on the walk, so limits trouble. Has walked into a little bit of power. That's where what you've got to avoid, and that's obviously what the Twins do well. So you're playing with fire a little bit if you go to the play. But I think he's priced appropriately for a guy who could go 6-7 innings of a couple of runs, maybe gives up a home run to somebody, 2-3 runs, but strikes out 7-8, something like that. I think that's totally viable for Kramer here. So moderate interest on FanDuel. Probably would have more interest if I was playing the DK slate as a mid-priced SP2. It's not a super discount at 81, but it's not expensive either. You can definitely use that as a playable part on DK. And then if I'm going to Twins, I like this version of the lineup with Correa in the leadoff spot, followed by Julien instead of the other way around. Buxton gives you power upside, but obviously strikes out a ton. Kirilloff, same story on the left side. Kepler, same story. Actually, he's better for strikeouts. I shouldn't say same story. What Kepler suffers with is the hit tool. 198, 271 in the front end of his triple slash. Not getting on base, not hitting for base knocks, but does have 10 home runs on the season. Does have a 203 ISO, 10.5% barrel. So Kepler's not a sellout for power kind of a guy because he doesn't strike out at that heavy a clip at only 21.4. But he's kind of right now only a power hitter, and kind of has been that guy. Jeffers and Castro, playable parts, and then Joey Gallo bringing up the bottom of the lineup. 3,500, 2,500, you know what you're getting with Joey Gallo. You're getting home runs or zeros for the most part. Does know how to draw a walk, get on base, and provide correlated scoring, so still sitting at 111 for the WRC+, but obviously is putting a lot of zeros into lineups with his 40% strikeout rate on the wrong night. On the right night, you get 2 home runs. Wrong night, you get 4 strikeouts. Joey Gallo. We'll move on to the next game. Let me jump back over to the chat, see what's going on. Kevin O's in there. Kevin O says mobile chat is great. How many pitches do I think that Soroka throws? He's been pitching in AAA, so I don't think he's limited. I think he's stretched out, right? Was he? He's had like 11 starts in AAA. Let me see what his last. I didn't look at the individual game logs for what he's done, but I will. I mean, it's obviously speculating and guessing, but yeah, last start was on the 22nd, pitched on the 16th, the 10th, the 4th, back through May. So he's been pitching regularly and going 6-7 innings in AAA. I don't think there's any issue with pitch count. I think it's just a matter of how good he is. So Larry says shocker tell has over 10 on the home run model. Yeah. That's it, man. I laughed at that when I saw it myself today. I was like, oh, maybe I should go into the back and give it a tweak or something just to satisfy Larry. But yeah, it's aggressive given what he's done this year. There's a lot of history there. It's a guy who's obviously been a premium power bat over the last couple of seasons. But sitting this year, 8.8% barrels, 37.6% hard hits. And like I talked about yesterday when I looked at his X-Slug was in the high 300s. So his actual slugging of 400 right now is slightly ahead of his X-Slug. So something's kind of going on there with Tellez. That was a good call out by you, Larry, and I appreciate it. It's something I'm going to be keeping an eye on going forward. He's obviously got 12 home runs and 274 plate appearances, so it's not like the output has been bad, but if the expectation is not necessarily there, then it becomes a little bit wonky to be forecasting a lot more home runs to come. So it's something I'm keeping my eye on for sure. I do still like him in terms of being able to put bat on ball. He's not 24.1% strikeouts this year. That's also probably part of the problem. Just fewer batted ball events in general leads to a lower barrel rate because you're taking fewer shots. So if you connect fewer times in fewer opportunities, you're going to be at a much lower rate. And you can see the dip, 8.8% down from 12.9 last year, 37.6% hard hits down from 45.7 last year. Part of that is on the increase in strikeouts. 20.2% last year was very, very good. That's what I liked about Rowdy Tellez, was that he was a power hitter who could still put bat on ball fairly reliably and generate that premium contact. So, like I said, I've said it several times already, something I'm going to be definitely keeping an eye on here. In this matchup, I am remiss to kind of recommend Freddie Peralta just based on all the power that he's given up, but I still believe that it's like incidental power that he's run into this year. He's really tough to figure out. I was looking at his pitch by pitch stuff. I was looking at all of his numbers, and like if you look pitch by pitch, his velo's up on his four-seamer. His velo's up on his slider. He's getting more whiffs on his slider this year than he was last year by a lot. His slider whiff rate jumped from 30.2% last year to 45.3% this year. But his curveball whiff rate dropped from 38% to 31.8%. He's drawing higher slugging percentages, up by about 100 points in the actual, with low 400s expected slugging percentage numbers against his fastball and slider, his two primary pitches. It's just weird. It's a really weird output year for Freddie Peralta with the increased velo, the increased whiff rate on the slider. His strikeout rate has dropped from 27.1 last year and 33.6 the year before to 25.4 this year. But like the swinging strike rate is up. The CSW is roughly around what it was last year. It's just weird. So I don't fully trust Freddie like I used to, but I do still think we've got good upside for strikeouts. I think we've got good upside to limit a lousy Pirates lineup that doesn't hit for a ton of power anyway. We just might have that game where we run into the stupid 3-run home run that kind of misshapes his score for the night. But I think that's also kind of baked into the price here. 97.92, that's cheap for Freddie Peralta against this Pirates team. So with a bit of hesitation around these concerning power marks, and these are concerning for what he's been over time, I definitely still want to get to some Freddie Peralta here. I don't know what his ownership's going to look like. If he gets crushingly popular because it's the Pirates on the other side, I think it's easy enough to walk away from some shares and kind of have some but leave a lot of it to the public. But I don't think he's going to get excessively popular just on the kind of rocky up and down performances this year. On the other side of this one, Osvaldo Bido, good strikeout rate. 15 and 2/3, 3 starts, 25.4% strikeouts. That has some potential against a Brewers lineup that we've kind of targeted in recent games for strikeouts. 24.7% strikeout rate overall for this confirmed version of the Brewers lineup. So Bito's not without a ceiling here. I just don't know how many times we need to go to it at 7,800. It's a viable play. It would just look a little bit more appealing for that cheapo DraftKings SP2 if he was, let's say 1,000 cheaper, which I don't think would be overly inappropriate in his fourth start here. It's not like we've got a huge track record of this kid being pretty good. He's not a premium prospect. He's not somebody who's overly highly regarded. You can see the flaws in the 8% swinging strike rate, the 27.9% CSW. These kind of belie this a little bit in terms of this probably isn't going to hold up if these are only here. 7% walks is fine. 42.6% hard hits is a little high, but it hasn't really burnt him. Only a 2.1% barrels is interesting, but that's probably just happenstance in the small sample. If he could keep that up, that would be outrageous, but it's probably just luck that he's missed those barrels. But 78 on both sites, a couple of darts. It's not like he projects well, so kind of take it as this kind of a play. Handful of points, cheap price, maybe you get there, but it's a big slate. There are other value pitchers, so I don't think we need to tangle with this one too many times. Doesn't really lead me to the Brewers lineup, though. We've obviously got Rowdy sitting at the big home run mark. Then we've got Yelich, Contreras, Willy Adames. All of those guys have power. Yelich is a guy I always focus on for all the hard hits, the stolen bases, all his quality up top. He's always cheap. He's always under-owned because people think he's not good anymore. But he still is pretty good. Maybe he's not a superstar, but maybe a tick down from a star. If he's not an A or an A-, he's like a B+. I'm happy to pay $44.34 in the outfield for a B+. That's a pretty good player at that price. Contreras has good power, but kind of an infrequent hitter, a lot like his brother on St. Louis. Willy Adames, similar story, 198, well below the Mendoza line, 287 on the on base, but all his power at shortstop still has value for $4,200, $3,000. Owen Miller's been productive, multi-position eligible, cheap pricing. Bryce Turang, cheap pricing, multi-position. Perkins, Weimer, Tapia, guys who can put bat on ball, can provide some counting stats. Tapia's got moderate power and good mid-range speed. Weimer's got a little bit of both, 11 home runs and 10 stolen bases on this season. Good athlete, guy you like to watch play the game, interesting hitter, 12.1% on the barrels, 40% on the hard hits, but striking out at nearly a 30% pace. So kind of a flawed player right now. We'll see what he pulls together overall, but at 26 on both sites in the outfield, that's a playable part. It's just a bad spot in the lineup. That was part of the conversation those guys were having in our Discord, by the way, which is free. Everybody who's not in there should jump in there. The rotoscouts Discord is always free. It's linked in the description on the show here. While you're on their way down to click that, click the thumbs up, click the subscribe if you've not already. I think everybody here basically is already subscribed and probably already hit the thumbs up, but thumbs are good, as I understand it, for YouTube algorithms and so on, and subscriptions let you know when I go live. It's been 4:15 a lot of days, but we're going into the weekend. That's highly variable. I actually might go to the track. My cousin's in from Vegas for the weekend, so I might go to the track tomorrow and meet them in the afternoon. So we'll see what we do show-wise tomorrow afternoon. Pay attention, but subscribing will help you find out. How about that tie-in? So yeah, what was I saying? Oh, the Discord. There's a lot of talk about, backward looking historical data on where the performances are. And some of it comes through as like, well, yeah, those are the guys who see the most plate appearances, and that's typically where teams put their star hitters. But there's a lot of track record that J187 was talking about specifically. He's the one who was tracking it, and then he and Dennis, XX Cubs fan in the Discord, were just going back and forth a little bit about lineup positions, and 1 through 3 is really your most productive hitters in basically every major league lineup. The cleanup hitters typically a big power bat, so I don't typically like to exclude them, but even starting at the cleanup spot, those guys were talking about and showing a lot of evidence that like that is a big drop-off point for successful MLB DFS production. So we really want to focus primarily on the top hitters in these lineups and consider guys from like 5 down as mix-in values, mix-and-match type pieces. We do have lineups where we get some extremely good players in those spots as outliers, and they're guys you certainly don't want to ignore. Like if you're stacking the Pirates today, you definitely don't want to leave out 5th hitting Jack Suwinski. He's one of their best bats. He's their best power hitter. But that spot on the lineup will come up fewer times overall. As you run this slate over and over and over again 10,000 times, that spot in the lineup is going to connect fewer times than the top 3 spots, just on virtue of plate appearances. Just on virtue of the overall on the average, the 3 top hitters in every lineup are going to be on the average better hitters than everybody else. So it kind of floats that a little bit, but there's very good reason to think of lineup construction in that kind of an approach of just, I want to roster these top 4 guys. How can I use the bottom few guys in small doses, one or two of them, to offset some of the price so that I can still get these top 3 guys from that group of hitters into a lineup that's viable, that's differentiated, that has a good second stack, that has good pitching. That's where the guys at the bottom of the lineup, like the Joey Weimers of the world, help. So we don't want to get carried away with those shares, just as a friendly reminder to everybody with lineup construction. So some Freddie, for sure, going after the Pirates. If you're going to Pirates, I don't love Palacios in the leadoff spot, but he's dead cheap at 2,000, 2,100 in the outfield. 1 home run, 2 stolen bases, and 84 plate appearances going into Andrew McCutchen, Henry Davis, Carlos Santana. So the projected version earlier in the day had Brian Reynolds back in the lineup, and he's not. So that's a big downgrade from where he even had them projected. So very, very limited interest in the Pirates. If you're going there, it is, 1, 2, and 3 with, kind of not that much interest in Palacios, and then maybe some shares of Carlos Santana as the cleanup hitter, and definitely Jack Suwinski in the 5 spot. Bottom end, Nick Gonzalez, Tucupita Marcano, Jared Triolo, and Austin Hedges. Not a ton of value there. You can see several of those guys haven't even been built into the back of my model here because I just plug in like 8s to replace them in what I do in the lineup optimizer that I use. Not Fantasy Cruncher. RG's optimizer, for anybody wondering. So, like I was saying, Freddie, minor interest in some top-end Brewers. Not that much interest in anything Pirates, but some shares of Beto is not out of the question for a value play. Small doses of Beto, though. Bo Sox and the Blue Jays. AL East battle. This is kind of an interesting one, just in terms of where these two teams are, where the pitching is in this one. Jose Barrios has been largely effective this year, but we all know that he can backslide and become the Mr. Hyde version of Jose Barrios very quickly in any given start. That's just kind of the nature of the beast with this pitcher. I think 95, 97 is appropriate for him. I feel like that projection is a little bit low. I just, when he's going right, he's a little bit better than that. So I would project him probably, I would push him up the board a little bit if I were building lineups right now. I don't know that I would have him projected out as high as Paxton on the other side. Paxton's got a lot of upside for strikeouts, 31.8% strikeouts on the year in 42 and a third innings, but also has been giving up a ton of barrels, some premium contact in the small sample, some home runs in the small sample, and he's also dealing with right knee pain. He came out of the last start after just 4 innings. He was pitching fairly well, but came out after 4 innings with right knee pain, and they're kind of treating it as like, we're going to put him out there. We don't really know if he's going to be okay, but he says he can do it, and he says he can tough his way through it, so we're going to let him pitch. I don't really know what to make of that on depth. Like, if Paxton has given them 5 fairly effective innings, handful of strikeouts, do they just yank him and turn it over to the bullpen? I'm not really sure. At 10-3, 10-1, it's a difficult price to find that out at it, too. There's definite upside there. He projects well. I'll play him. I expect he's probably going to be low owned because of that. So that might push me to a few more shares in the field. But I don't know that it's a spot I want to get carried away with. And the Blue Jays show plenty of upside against him. The Blue Jays are already difficult to strike out anyway, 18.1% for that confirmed lineup, and with no real small plate appearance samples in there. You could argue maybe Santiago Espinal, 12.8% over 125 is low, but 13.8% in more plate appearances for him last year. I feel like it's at least realistic. So just a difficult team to strike out overall, going up against all the star power of Springer, Bichette, Vladdy Guerrero, Matt Chapman with all his premium contact, even though it doesn't turn into home runs too frequently lately, still mashing the ball when he makes contact. Alejandro Kirk, Danny Jansen, Whit Merrifield, Dalton Varsho, Santiago Espinal. It's a good bottom end of the lineup. Those are a lot of good mix and match quality type players that you can do exactly what I was describing before. You need offsets to help your roster Springer, Bichette, and Guerrero together on both sites. So those guys are very effective. Like a guy like Varsho for 36-28, 12 home runs on the season, 10 steals, can do a lot of things in a lineup for a cheap price. But you don't want to go like Jansen, Merrifield, Varsho, and then Bichette and Vladdy. That's not a great version of that stack. You want to go more 3 of the top guys, 1 of the bottom guys, 2 of the bottom guys. Maybe the Derby can fix Vladdy's lack of power. We need that launch angle. Yeah, Vladdy's been weird this season. Like I've talked about a couple times, the barrels are up, the hard hits are up. The power should be there, but it hasn't been. 12 home runs, a 176 ISO. 12 home runs and 344 plate appearances for the average mortal is a good total. But for Vladdy Guerrero, that's definitely down. But he's a good buy. His price is down with that, 5,200, 3,500. That's a good buy for Vlad Guerrero, especially because nothing's wrong with him, right? Like the lack of home runs, the lack of doubles and whatnot to support the ISO is probably just chalked up to happenstance. It's not like he's striking out more. He's striking out less than he did last year, 15.7% versus 16.4. He's barreling the ball more. He's hitting it harder. There's just a little bit of happenstance that's preventing him from having an outrageous total. So I like the discount on Vladdy, and I think I'll take advantage of it. I'd probably go to more Blue Jays bats here than Paxton. If I'm ranking this one out, it's probably Blue Jays bats, then Paxton, then Barrios, then the Red Sox bats, I think. I like the opportunity for Barrios at price. Definitely strikeout upside going up against the Red Sox. But there's danger in that lineup too. Jaron Duran, Alex Verdugo, Yoshida, Rafi Devers. That's a run of 4 pretty good left-handed hitters to start things off, if nothing else. Duran's a young kid, but he's been productive at the plate this year. 15 stolen bases, a 292, 347 on the front end of his triple slash. Verdugo's an excellent top end of the lineup hitter who gets on base like crazy. Yoshida's been very good at getting on base and generating runs. Devers has all his ridiculous power. He's also kind of backslid in terms of his triple slash, 246, 315, 492, but still a 246 ISO, 19 home runs. It's not like Devers has been bad. He's also had more barrels this year and more hard hits this year than last. So, him and Vladdy, both 2 oddly scuffling somewhat players, depending on how you look at them, but also perfectly fine and just playing exactly like who they are if you look at them in other angles. So, just weird situational statistics for those guys right now. I expect both of them will look exactly how they normally do in terms of their overall numbers by the end of the year. Justin Turner, valuable veteran bat, drops in the lineup in this spot, but I like him hitting 5th there. Tristan Casas, I talked about expecting big things from him in the second half. I think that's really realistic. 13.9% barrels, 46.2% hard hits, walks at a 14% clip, so I don't really care about the 26% strikeouts, and as long as that's not way over 30, we're okay. Hits for power with 9 home runs on the season so far, but I think there's more coming for Casas. He's up to 227, 333, 404 after living below the Mendoza line for a while early in the season. 102 WRC plus. I think a lot of this is going higher for Tristan Casas as the year goes on. Arroyo, Hamilton, Connor Wong. Take him or leave him in the final third. Wong is a productive enough catcher. 6 home runs on the season. That number hasn't changed since I've been talking about him, but I do like the contact that he makes at the plate. A lot like Kyle Higashioka. So for me, this one's both pitchers in some shares and both stacks, with the Blue Jays bats preferred probably ultimately into Paxton, Berrios, and the Red Sox bats. But this is a 4 corners game for me, and not one that I think is like all 4 parts or no 4 parts. Like, I think if you're building 150 lineups, you want to have some of each of those parts in that game. Is it just me, or has Toronto been a bit underwhelming lately as a whole, and not just him? Yeah, they've been, up and down a little bit this season. They had the weird start from George Springer. He was really cold to start the year, and he's kind of come on, but Bo Bichette's kind of been a little bit of a dip. Vladdy's had that weird power output. Chapman still just absolutely crushes the ball when he makes contact with it. But this 10 home run total was 9 at the end of April. So that hasn't really changed. Still producing runs, still hitting for ISO, but this was over 300 a month ago. This was over in the 180s, 190s a month ago. And then the back end is up and down. Varsho's had a rocky season. Merrifield's a hit tool and speed guy, but if nobody drives him in, he can't really do much to change the score. And then Jansen, Kirk, Espinal, Calvin Biggio. It's a lineup with some holes. It's a lineup that needs their stars up top to really perform, to drive all the production. But yeah, I think ultimately it does normalize, specifically with Vladdy. Bo Bichette will be fine. Springer's already normalized. So once all 3 of those guys are going well at the same time, I think they'll just be rocking and rolling. Back to the Museum of Natural History mug today, by the way. If you've never been, I highly recommend it. If you got some free time on an afternoon in New York City, great place to go. The Giants, the Mets, Carlos Carrasco, Alex Cobb. 2 very different looking pitchers to me, even though Carrasco projects kind of well. This is one that I'm not too confident in where that projection's sitting right now. If I'm loading this up into my optimizer, I'm either cutting that down or cutting his ownership projection, his ownership caps down pretty significantly. He's a talented guy. I believe that there's still a good pitcher in there in his late 30s went on the right night. But overall, 48 innings, 10 starts, 15.1% strikeouts, a 9.9% swinging, a 24.8% CSW, 10.6% walks, all that premium contact at 9.5% barrels, 44.3% hard hits, a 5.05% home run rate, and he's not working deep into ball games anymore. He was earlier in the season. He had a handful of 5 and 6 inning starts, but the last 4 starts, it was 5 innings, 4 and 2/3, 4 and 3 and 2/3, something like that. It has not been pretty for Carrasco here. So that's kind of leading me to Giants bats. They're carrying a inflated total. I think it was above 5, if I'm remembering correctly from when I was writing it. Oh, Larry says the San Francisco lineup's in. Oh, Flores is back. Very nice. Let me grab that while I talk. Wilmer back in the lineup. So for those who like to hunt narratives, Wilmer and J.D. Davis in a revenge spot, but no Michael Conforto. Wilmer's had more than enough opportunity to avenge his time with the Mets that he absolutely loved and probably isn't mad about. And J.D. Davis, he's one who might be pissed off at the Mets. Not that I believe in any of this in terms of he's going to really try to hit the ball hard tonight. But for those who do like to chase that sort of things, J.D. Davis could have had a better opportunity with the Mets and should have had a better opportunity with the Mets. He did basically everything he's doing in terms of contact this year on a regular basis when he was with that club and just never really got a full opportunity. So out of people who could be pissed off at the Mets in this game, J.D. Davis is probably on that list. Not that it's going to translate into more or less production or more or less effort at the plate in any kind of quantifiable way. So we don't care about it, but it's an interesting note. So I'm going to grab some Giants bats for sure here against Carlos Carrasco. They've got too much power, too much premium contact, too many good hitters that get on base fairly reliably. So Lamont Wade Jr. I talk about a lot. 4,100, 3,200 for that hitter when he's leading off is too cheap. 42.9% hard hits, 9.8% barrels, only strikes out at an 18.8% clip, walks at 17.1%. So he walks almost as much as he strikes out, which isn't all that much in terms of strikeouts, but is a lot in terms of walks. 416 on base percentage, a 46% better than average run creation mark for the season, 9 home runs on the season. Wilmer is a good right-handed bat. Fills first base, unfortunately, on the DK slate, so you're choosing between those two on DK. Wilmer at 29 is a great buy on that slate, though. 25 first base and third base on FanDuel, good buy over there. 7 home runs for Wilmer on the season in 174 earlier plate appearances, a 192 ISO, creating runs 10% better than average, and has been a productive hitter with a little bit of power over time. Jock Peterson, lefty with tons and tons of power going up against a flawed, limited righty who's giving up a ton of power. I really like the opportunity for Jock Peterson to go deep here. It's probably not coming through as much as it maybe could in the home run model at 8.77. That's a spot I really, really like tonight. JD, I was talking about just a minute ago, he's really cheap too for all his output this season. I know a lot of the home runs came early in the year. He kind of rushed out to 10 home runs and has cooled a little bit in terms of the actual power output for home runs. But a 128 WRC plus, maintaining a 286, 365, 464 in the triple slash, 10.8% barrels, 48.9% hard hits for 4,200, 2,900. That's a productive third baseman to get to in a good matchup. Bailey, Thairo Estrada, Blake Sabol, Luis Matos, Brandon Crawford, all at worst playable mix and match parts. You get 2 catchers in this lineup with Bailey and Sabol on DK where you need catchers. Both at good prices. Both have been productive this year in different ways. Bailey 324, 350, 541 with a 141 WRC plus in 119 plate appearances. I think we limit our expectations overall, but has been playing very well. Sabol, lefty pop on the other side of the dish at 7 home runs. 95 WRC plus in 209 plate appearances, has kind of settled into who he probably is. 11.7% barrels, though, for 3,825 as a second catcher. That's pretty valuable. 52.35 is arguably a little bit high for Thairo Estrada. We're talking about a guy who, like, it's a productive player. He's got 9 home runs and 18 stolen bases on the season. I don't want to act like he's not. And he's been very good in San Francisco, but that's like the top end of where we should see him price-wise, I think. 14 homers, 21 steals last year in his big breakout season. 260, 322, 402, 7% better than average creating runs. I think we should maybe not get carried away with our enthusiasm about Thairo Estrada. I get that he's justifiably the highest priced player on this team on both sites, but let's not go any further with pricing him up than this, and maybe let's bring him down to earth a little bit. Second base only on DK, second and shortstop on FanDuel, totally playable. On the Mets side, going up against Alex Cobb, I'm kind of limited in my interest in Mets stacks here. They're kind of a rocky team anyway. You've got an underperforming Francisco Lindor in everything except for his home run output and his ISO, which is fine and totally playable. Pete Alonso, obviously a home run hitter and a star, 24 home runs on the season, a massive ISO, plenty of hard hit and contact. But it's a lineup that's got Jeff McNeil miscast in the third spot, Daniel Vogelbach hitting fifth, Tommy Pham, who's been very good this year but is still Tommy Pham, Brett Beatty, Marcana, Omar Narvaez, so you don't even get the premium Francisco Alvarez rookie at the catcher spot. Not that Narvaez is bad by any means. It's just not a great Mets lineup in general, and Alex Cobb is pretty good at limiting opposing power. He's one of these guys that keeps the ball on the ground, limits launch angle, 0.3 degrees so far this year, and a 1.78% home run rate in 78 and 2/3, 14 starts. Last year, 1.8 degrees, 1.43% home run rate. Year before, 3.0 degrees, 1.27, 4.2% barrels that year, 3.7% barrels last year. Barrels are actually up a little bit this season, but we're not really concerned about that. That's a little bit of happenstance in only 78 and 2/3 innings. So I think there's at least upside for Cobb to keep the Mets in check. Do we want to chase Alex Cobb shares at 86.93? I think that's a little bit more questionable. I think it's more just like he's going to keep the Mets probably to 3 or 4 runs. He could have a decent start, but 22.5% strikeout rate guy. He pitches clean innings, 3.09 ERA, 3.24 xFIP, but limited strikeout output against a team that doesn't feed strikeouts to the opposing pitcher. It's not like he's facing the Twins or the Mariners that are going to really just elevate that for him. So only minor interest in Alex Cobb, I think. I like the value pricing in like that mid-range value kind of a guy. And like I said, I would go to him before I go to Carrasco in this spot, but it's not great. Same time, just given that limitation, you can see it in the home run marks. Pete Alonso at 6.6. All these other guys lower single digits. It's not a great stacking opportunity, but if I am going to Mets, it's obviously the top four. Nimmo, Lindor, and Alonso are the focus. This is one where like it's very clear that you don't want to just say, hey, my top three as the only focus here, because Jeff McNeil is a limited slap-hitting second baseman of a player. Second base and outfield on FanDuel. The price is fine for Jeff McNeil, but he's a BABIP-focused player. He needs hits to fall in. He needs people to drive him in to create any kind of value. And you can see that. He's not had a good BABIP season, so he's sitting at 255, 332, 325, and a 91 WRC+. There's not a lot of value there. You don't want to skip Pete Alonso to go to him. So Alonso substitutes in there as the third man in that in the valuable players section of the lineup here. So it's Nimmo, Lindor, and Alonso, and then a lot of bolt-on parts. Brett Beatty's a good rookie. Mark Canha and Tommy Pham are valuable, reliable veterans who can produce in spots. Like I said, Pham has had a great season, 14.8% barrels, lots of hard hits, 8 home runs, 215 ISO, 29% better than average creating runs. But if we're capping our expectation for home run output, we're capping his power, then we've got to kind of cap him in terms of where our expectations go. So it's limited shares of the Mets top end, and then some bolt-in pieces if you get carried away with shares. Giants are the much more interesting stack in this one. Alex Cobb, the more interesting of the two pitchers, but I'll be limited if I get to any. Let's see what the chat's saying. We got Trey in the chat. What's going on, Trey? Welcome, welcome. Could be Travis says, do you worry at all about pinch hit risk when stacking San Fran? In minor ways, but I mean, a lot of these guys have been putting up full games this season. They haven't been mixing and matching as much because they're just staggering their lineup pretty well in most situations this season. So from what I've observed, just kind of casually, I haven't dug into it too much, but just kind of casually observing, it's not a spot that I worry about too much. And in a lot of situations, like they've done their damage already by the time we get to that point, or they're just not going to do it. So do I sacrifice one plate appearance with somebody in a lineup? Possibly, but I'm not overly concerned about it when going to the Giants. I think they've got enough quality there that we can go to them. Lone Wolf in the chat. Lone Wolf says, hey, Terry, what's up, Lone Wolf? Mike Brigham says the Derby broke Chapman a few years back. Yeah, there's home run derbies tend to break these guys. It's kind of amazing. I don't know what it is about swinging the bat that many times that night, or just like you're focused on crushing batting practice pitches for a night that it screws them up and their timing and everything. It's very weird. FanDuel doesn't have Cobb playing. He's not a choice. That's odd. They didn't even change their pitcher, did they? Schmab still has Cobb. He's in the player pool. Right? He's 9,300, so he's in the player pool. By the way, Mike Soroka is showing on the screen right now with no salary. He is also in the player pool. You're looking for Michael Soroka. I didn't have a chance to fix it in my naming table today. But yeah, Cobb should be in that pool. If they're not flagging him as the starter, that's so much the better. That would actually maybe make him a little bit more interesting and sneaky. No, he's there. He's there. He's flagged as on the IL, at least on the app. He's there, flagged on the IL with an oblique injury. I did forget that he was just coming back to the rotation. Pitched last on the 13th, so it's not like it was a long injury stint. Went 4 on the 13th. Went 5 on the 8th. So that's weird. Maybe not a lot of people going to him for DFS purposes. Probably a good reason. We're probably getting 5 innings of only moderately appealing DFS output in terms of his strikeout rate and the Mets' ability to kind of limit strikeouts. So I'm going to read it basically the same way with the new information. Is just kind of like he's probably more apt to limit the Mets than he is to put up a monster score. I think that's the Cobb read for today. Marlins going up against the Braves with Soroka on the hill. Like we talked about at the top of the show, Soroka's been pitching in AAA and has made a bunch of recent regular starts. So I would expect this to be a basically full pitch count situation. If he's going well, I see no reason that they would limit him. He's been up and down in his major league innings for his career. What was it? 2019 as a 21-year-old. He had a pretty good season. Not crazy in terms of the strikeouts, but effective overall. So he was good that year, and then he's just been banged up the last few years. So he just really hasn't had a ton of major league innings over the last few years. Right now, sitting at 9 2/3 in 2 outings at the major league level this year, 10.4% strikeouts, 12.5% walks, and then just no recent history of the last 2 seasons. But if we go to the old Fangraphs page here real quick, I want to pull up what he's done in AAA this year. The AAA numbers are typically effective with him. But the strikeouts aren't great. 4.68 xFIP, 3.31 ERA in 11 starts, 54 and a third at AAA this season. Striking out 23.5. So like an okay but not great strikeout rate. At the major league level, when he was good in 2019, he only struck out 20.3. Not a pitcher who's lousy for walks in general. So like the walk rate for this year's tiny sample that's on screen right now is not accurate to who he is. But the strikeouts are not ideal. Like, he doesn't give a massive amount of strikeout upside. If we get 5-6 clean innings, he's cheap. I think his price was like 71 and change on DK. So he's cheap. I think he's viable and playable here at price in a fairly good matchup against the Marlins, but they've been frisky this year. He doesn't have massive strikeout upside. So I think he's cheap, but like kind of limited. So maybe like, mid-range handful of shares on the DK slate. Don't know that we need him on FanDuel. I'm not sure if we've got the quality start and play on FanDuel. Not that I expect, like I said, a limit on his pitches, but just getting to that 6 innings, getting to the clean 6 innings, I think maybe is in question. The Marlins have been good at the top of the lineup at least. This is definitely a lineup where those top 2 guys make a ton of sense with Luis Arias and Jorge Soler. Those guys just play so well together, with Arias' ability to hit, get on base, and then Soler's big bat knocking him in. 21 homers at 132 WRC plus for Soler. Arias is cheap at 49.31 for a player creating runs, 56% better than average. Doesn't hit for a ton of power, but he's always on base. He's always involved. Brian De La Cruz is probably not the 3rd best option. Jazz Chisholm is probably the 3rd best option hitting 4th, but De La Cruz has been very good. Costs 4,200, correlates well with the top of the lineup, correlates well with Chisholm. So really that's a 4-man off the top there. All 4 of those guys in order, I think, is a very playable, viable stack here. You can mix and match some Garrett Cooper into it. Joey Wendell's a slap-hitting veteran with a little bit of speed. John Birdie's a stolen base guy who hasn't gotten on base enough this year, hasn't stolen enough bases this year. Led the league with 41 stolen bases last year, has 8 so far this season in 240 plate appearances, getting on at a 315 clip, creating runs 19% worse than average. Jesus Sanchez, I wish he was hitting like 5th. He'd be a lot more relevant if he was hitting 5th. He was out to a great start before his injury, but cost himself a lot of plate appearances, cost himself the rhythm that he was in. He hasn't really found it since coming back to the lineup. He's very cheap. He does have lefty power late in the lineup, and then Jacob Stallings, cheap catcher, but completely buried the lead on this one. Braves bats against Brian Hoeing here. Major opportunity. They're projected for, I think it was a 5.8 run implied total in Vegas. One of the teams I mentioned at the top of the show is projecting for a higher run total than the game in Coors Field on either side. Tons and tons of power in the Braves lineup. Confirmed version is the everyday version of this lineup with all the quality up top, with all those home runs. You can see 6 guys in the model carrying better than the magic number in terms of home run output. Eddie, if I fed it some of his current year stuff a little bit more, would probably be at least approaching that level of output. Kind of hampered by his 2 injury-marred seasons from the last 2 years. But like I've talked about on some recent shows and written about in the article, Eddie Rosario is a premium hitter who's got multiple seasons of high 20s and into the 30s home run output in the not-so-distant past. He just had 2 up-and-down seasons that were kind of racked by injuries the last 2 years. But as recently as the 2017 through the short 2020 season was a very good power-hitting outfielder. So nothing that he's done this year in the 269, 318, 500, 231 ISO, 13 home runs so far, none of that is all that surprising from Eddie Rosario. He's just hitting down lineup, and he's cheap, and he's always under-owned. So I like that spot. Ozuna's right there with him. Nothing that Ozuna's done in his 16 home runs, 242 ISO, 251, 332, 493. That's also just kind of who Marcell Ozuna is when he's going right, when he's healthy, when he's not suspended. That's Marcell Ozuna. The quality in this lineup is, massively from 1 through 5, but 6 through 9 in this lineup. If you told me you had to play a entirely bottom of the lineup stack, what team would you go to? It would definitely be this one. Ozuna, Rosario, Arcia, and Harris could hit 1 through 4 on a lot of other teams. Arcia, one of our favorite utility men in the league in terms of DFS purposes with his 3-position eligibility. He's their everyday shortstop, but for DFS purposes, he's on FanDuel, 2,800 shortstop, third base, second base. He's an all-star this year. That's not bad. Something Dansby Swanson never did in Atlanta, which he was happy to tweet about, Arcia. I didn't actually fact-check that. I'm surprised. Swanson's been a really good shortstop, but I believe him. But yeah, congrats to Arcia's making the all-star team here. This entire lineup's outrageous. You can go to them from top to bottom. Michael Harris has been coming on like gangbusters over the past month and change. 266, 318, 432 now. 101 WRC plus above the waterline finally. 7 home runs, 9 stolen bases for last year's Rookie of the Year. Just an outrageous run back to quality. If you saw this and knew nothing about his struggles and his injury earlier in the season, you would just be like, oh, Michael Harris obviously missed some games because only 217 plate appearances, but looks just like he looked last year. We're back. So I'm not worried about Harris. 1 through 9 on the Braves lineup with enthusiasm. They'll be highly owned. They're totally worth it. FanDuel pricing, not all that bad. DK pricing, a little bit aggressive and high, but totally justifiable for Albies, Riley, Olsen, Ronald Acuna, obviously, at the top of the lineup. 331, 408, 585, 254 ISO, 65% better than average grading runs, 19 home runs, 36 stolen bases. Estuardo Ruiz had better watch his back. Ronald Acuna might catch him, which is just completely bananas. Let's move on. So that one was major enthusiasm about Braves bats. Maybe a few shares of Soroka since the price is right, but I don't know what the innings are going to look like. No interest at all in Brian Hoeing. Minor shares of the Marlins in the top end. But I have a healthy respect for Soroka as a talented pitcher who can limit another team. I just don't know if we're getting strikeouts from him. I don't know if we're getting depth from him. And then if you think in terms of like that kind of a pitcher against Luis Arias, it could be like a 4-hit day for Luis Arias, and then nobody else in the lineup does all that much. So it's kind of a take it or leave it spot in terms of Marlins bats, take it or leave it spot in terms of Soroka, but definite enthusiasm for Braves bats. Astros, Rangers. I know I said I was putting my placeholder lineups in, but let me make sure. I know I put one in, but I just want to make sure now that I thought of it real quick. Okay, I did book the full slate. Just didn't want to wake up at 6 o'clock with only one lineup sitting in there as my placeholder either. That would have been probably worse, because that feeds me the ability to just sit there and click on the entry button and try and crack in my way to more lineups like I had to do the other day. Astros and Rangers. What is everybody saying in the chat? And break things up a little bit. Swanson should reply back to RC with his bank statement. That would be a dynamite response from Dansby. That's absolutely true. Arcia, yeah, I referenced a tweet that I saw somebody sent out the other day about all Dansby was included, and then all these different high-priced shortstops around the league, and then Arcia making like 4.6 mil or whatever it is. Not that we want to sneeze, it's 4.6 mil, but not the 20 that a lot of these other guys are making, and his ridiculous output this year. So yeah, it would be a good response by Dansby for sure. This one's an interesting spot. The Rangers are kind of only projected in the like upper middle of the board for me today, oddly. It's going up against Ronel Blanco, who has no real track record to speak of. Hasn't been overly impressive so far. He's struck out a good handful at 24%, and his swinging strike rate is outrageous. 16.4% swinging strike rate is fantastic. Very, very small sample, obviously. But he's also given up a ton of barrels, 12.2%, a ton of home runs, 5.19%. But not all that many hard hits. 34.7 is totally reasonable in terms of the hard hits. So maybe that's just a few mistakes that he's made, a few, elevated fly balls. But overall, 4.63 ERA, 4.92 xFIP, and 11.7% walk rate. I don't think I'm going to chase strikeouts even at price 6,800, 6,300 with a pitcher who's giving up all that contact and all those walks, going right up against the Rangers and their outrageous lineup. So it's just having a weird impact on where the Rangers are projected. I hope I don't have to put the thumb on my scale, my thumb on the scale. Either way, the thumb on my scale. It's my scale. It's my scale. It's my thumb. Hope I don't have to thumb this one into relevance. Obviously, I want to get to some Rangers against Blanco here, but maybe I temper expectations. If the field's getting like over the top with Rangers, maybe I can go a little bit less heavy. But I definitely want to get to some Semien Seager, Nathaniel Lowe, Adolis Garcia, Josh Young, Jonah Heim, Ezekiel Duran. You've got the Jankowski version of the lineup, so you don't have the Heim and Garver play for DK purposes with two stout power bats at catcher. But this is another lineup that plays, basically top to bottom. You can take or leave Jankowski. I guess you could take or leave Taveras, but he's been super productive this year. Creating runs 29% better than average, almost entirely from the 9 spot. That's pretty good. Being able to do that, just hitting 9th means you've been pretty damn good this season. 296, 346, 479, 9 homers, 8 stolen bases. Doesn't put up a massive number of counting stats, but isn't priced that way. 3,300, 2,900. You only need him to get on base, score a few runs, put up one of those tag along scores along with like a Corey Seager big home run double bunch of RBIs type day. So you don't need major output from Taveras at price. Adolis Garcia is a great player in the heart of the lineup. 56, 4,000. Full freight on FanDuel, maybe $200 too cheap, $300 too cheap on DK. You could argue that he's a $6,000 player on DK. 20 home runs on the season, 31% better than average creating runs, 15.6% barrels, 51.3% hard hits. Jake Swales asks if anybody thinks it's not crazy to think that Gomber can post 14 points or better at 5,400 against the Tigers. So there's an important difference in my mind between can and is likely to. When we play DFS, we want to kind of focus more on probability than possibility. Can Gomber go out there and do that? Absolutely. Will Gomber go out there and do that, or is he even somewhat likely to? I don't think so. I know it's the Tigers. They're awful. They're completely inept. Just the way that ballpark plays, and it's not even in terms of like they're going to hit a bunch of home runs tonight. It's just that big outfield, the way that ballpark plays, it just feeds too much opportunity back the other way and makes it so unreliable. And he's been so bad this year. Can he do it? Yes. Will he do it? I doubt it. We'll talk about it more when we get there. Now I can't blow by the pitching slate. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Now I can't blow past Coors Field in terms of pitching. We'll get to it. So Rangers, this is mid-level enthusiasm, kind of like mid-priority stack that might get pushed up a little bit if they're not popular, pushed down a little bit for me if they are popular. But 1 through 9, I can definitely play them. Jankowski's a take or leave guy, but 306, 414, 398, 35% better than average, 8 stolen bases, has been productive in his 129 plate appearances and is very cheap. Obviously, we're focusing 1 through 3 for sure. 4 and 5 definitely can be bolted in there. So can 6 and 7. But it's like, diminishing returns, diminishing shares as we go. Astros on the other side, they're underperforming. Still no Jordan Alvarez in the lineup. Going up against John Gray. I know they tattooed Adam Wainwright last night, which we should have all expected at his ridiculous 10% strikeout rate and all the contact he allows. Much more difficult matchup against John Gray in current form. 21.6% strikeouts. It's not like he's punching out hitters left, right, and center, but a good pitcher, an effective guy. 2.89 ERA, 4.38 xFIP is probably a little bit more telling, but it settles probably into like the 3.5 range in both numbers over time. So I think he's about right. I think he's priced about right at 9,300, 10,000 for the matchup. The Astros have struggled all year. They've got great name recognition with Jose Altuve, Alex Bregman, Kyle Tucker, Jose Abreu for all his struggles, still a name recognition guy. I think they maybe get a little bit more popularity than I want them at on the back of a big night, with a little bit of name recognition, with affordable pricing, in a spot where people are going to be like, John Gray, it's not like an intimidating matchup. I think maybe the Astros get out a little bit ahead of where I would want them. 4,700, 3,400 is undeniably a great price for Jose Altuve. He should just not be priced that low. It's not his, maybe it's his fault. I don't remember what his injury was, but he's only got just 4 home runs and 5 stolen bases because he missed all that time. It's not like he's underperformed in the 124 plate appearances we've had him for. He's been Jose Altuve. He should be a 5,000 plus player on DK, a high threes player on FanDuel. So take the discount on Altuve. Bregman is kind of just this guy now. 12 home runs, a 161 ISO. Limited power, but plays every day. Puts bat on ball fairly effectively. Doesn't strike out. Walks at a decent clip. So Alex Bregman, still an effective veteran third baseman. Kyle Tucker at some point is going to come rampaging back in terms of his quality. Right now, 11 home runs is fine. 14 stolen bases is fine. But it's limited for what we expect from him. 178 ISO is limited. 127 WRC plus, again, fine, but limited for what we want from him. But he'll get back to quality. And we want to be ahead of the curve when he does. Abreu, Diaz, Julks, Pena, Myers, Maldonado, just kind of mix and match values throughout the rest of this lineup. I don't know if we got the confirmed version of it in. We did. Looks almost exactly the same, except Mauricio Dubon hitting 6th, which he was showing some value when he was subbing in for Jose Altuve, getting regular plate appearances at the top of the lineup, but Mauricio Dubon hitting 6th is entirely skippable. It's skippable in terms of if you roster 30 stacks of Astros, which I don't think you should in this spot. Maybe you put him in 5 to 10. Not entirely skippable if you're building tons and tons of Astros because you're going to need him. But I like Chas McCormick a lot better hitting 7th than I do Dubon hitting 6th. Jake Myers, Maldonado rounded out. Not a great version of the Astros lineup. Just getting them without Jordan Alvarez, who does everything for them, is problematic. So, this one was John Gray. Definite interest in a mid-range kind of shares. Maybe a little bit more aggressive if he comes up fairly low owned. I like John Gray as a pitcher, so I'll get to that. 9,300 too on the DK slate. That's a very good price for this pitcher in this spot. So I like the John Gray play. 10,000 is a little high. I expected to keep his ownership low on FanDuel, so I'm happy about that. Don't mind paying it. Some shares of Rangers bats for sure. Very limited interest in Ronald Blanco. I think the strikeout rate is maybe real given the swinging strike rate, and the price is fine. I just hate the matchup. If he were facing like even the Mariners or the Twins, like a good opportunity for strikeouts from a team that can hit hard, I'd be a little bit more interested. This Rangers team is just too good, I think, in this spot. So I don't think I want to chase it with Blanco shares, and then only minor interest in the Astros. Dodgers and Royals. Dodgers are another team that's drawing a Coors-esque, Coors higher than Coors type total in this matchup. Alec Marsh is a rookie. He's a premium prospect. He's a number 2 ranked prospect in the Royals system. He costs only $4,000, which is kind of interesting. I expect he's getting a full start here. It's it's not an opener situation. It's kind of an unfair spot to put him in his debut. 11 starts at AA this year, 3 at AAA. In AA, he had a 4.33 xFIP and a 5.32 ERA with a 26.4% strikeout rate. AAA against higher competition, he was a little bit better, 28.8% strikeouts, 4.28 xFIP, 2.40 ERA. But again, that's only a 3-start sample. I hate that this debut spot is against the Dodgers because 4,000 would be totally interesting for that pitcher against a lot of teams, even in his major league debut. Even against the Dodgers, I think you could squeeze a little something out of it. Is it more realistic to expect a handful of DK points at 4,000 for him or from the 14 that we want from Austin Gomber at price? At what, 2,000 and change less, I think, than Gomber? I think I'd rather take the shots even against the Dodgers. Like, if you want to consider the Dodgers and Coors Field as leveling factors in those starts, then, maybe we're just getting a better opportunity for that kid. Gomber's 1,400 more on DK, pitching at Coors against a worse lineup, obviously. But if the limiting factor is, the Dodgers lineup or Coors Field with the Tigers lineup, it probably works out about evenly. So if I can save money and go to the kid who's a better strikeout option, probably a better pitcher than Austin Gomber overall, it's a deadly bad spot. But just thinking that through from a DFS perspective, I'm glad I don't have to do it in either spot on the FanDuel slate. But I think if I was playing DK, I might be inclined to look that kid's direction before Austin Gomber's direction. Not that I want to do it with either one of them. I think they're just too low-end plays. But that 4,000 cheap hitter price has some appeal. What does it need for a DK score for 4,000? Not that much. A few strikeouts. I don't expect the Royals to find a win here. Some strikeouts, some innings. It's thin, but maybe. It's a good enough pitcher to do it based on how he looks in his profile anyway. Walks too many, by the way. That was the other concern. Double-digit walk rates in the minors. So another big concern there going up against this Dodgers team. I think we want to be just lousy with Dodgers bats. Like for every share of Alec Marsh that I booked on DK, if I did, I would book, 4-5 shares of Dodgers bats. I think it's a great spot for the Dodgers. Don't get anything I said about the pitcher wrong. I think they've got an opportunity to tattoo this kid, chase him early. Remember what we were talking about with Brian Wu and his unfair debut against the Texas Rangers, where he's been outstanding in his other starts, but they chased him with like 6-7 runs, a couple homers in like 2 2/3. That's kind of what I see here for Alec Marsh. So I want to be realistic about the spot. Definitely want to get to some Dodgers bats. They're super expensive. A lot harder to roster on DK with all those 5s and 6s. more playable on FanDuel, where Will Smith is still not a pitcher. Got to change that. Goodbye, Will Smith. Hello, Bill Smith. Let's just do that. Why wouldn't they do that for us? It's not like that Will Smith is at all relevant. What is he, a relief pitcher for San Diego? Dude's not relevant. Same story with Luis Garcia, the Astros pitcher. He's out for the season. Let's just take him out of the salary pool. What are we doing? Why do we have to create these problems for people unnecessarily? Anyway, Will Smith, the catcher, $3,800 on FanDuel. That's pretty cheap for that player on FanDuel. I got to say, even though you don't need catchers over there, play him as if he's a first baseman, a second first baseman in this lineup. He's an outstanding player. 12 home runs on the season, a 220 ISO, 49% better than average creating runs, gets on base at a 404 clip, strikes out 13% of the time, 16% walks. Will Smith is outstanding. 5,800 on DK is correct. He's an outstanding catcher option on the DK slate. Obviously, Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman are tremendous players. Mookie's still 2 position eligible on DK, 3 position eligible on FanDuel. Tremendous bargain. Leads the team with 20 home runs, 40% better than average creating runs. Freddie is a terrific hitter, 321, 399, 544, tons of power. Stolen base upside for a first baseman is valuable. His 6,000 and 4,200 price tags are totally justifiable every day, and let alone in this matchup in Kansas City. JD Martinez, David Peralta, Jason Hayward, James Outman, Miguel Rojas. Out of that group, Rojas has been bad, 55 WRC plus. Everybody else has been at least productive in spots. Good left-handed power through that group, all cheap. A lot of outfielders, a lot of lefties, but that's a good group of hitters to go to in terms of if you're looking down lineup with any teams, looking for cheap bats with any teams. You can do a lot worse than David Peralta, Jason Hayward, James Outman, at the very least. Martinez belongs in that top group of hitters. He's just been outstanding this season as well. I've used the word outstanding like 5 times in talking about the Dodgers in the last 3 minutes. But that's what they are. They're just a tremendous lineup. They're an all-star team. 19 home runs on the season for Martinez and a just roar back to relevance. 319 ISO that nobody was expecting. 17.2% barrels that nobody was expecting. 52.9% hard hits. He was a tremendous power hitter for years. But we were all kind of saying goodbye to JD Martinez. And he said, no, not quite done yet. I'm going to have another monster season here. So love getting to him. What does the future look like in terms of the second half? It's difficult to say. But it's not like there's any holes. It's not like we can, the 30% strikeout rate, sure, that's high. But he's maintained quality. I think he continues this. I really do. Maybe it's not quite this level. Maybe he doesn't finish the season with 40 home runs. But obviously we're trending north of 30. Into the mid-30s. 19 on the season so far. Dynamite player. Royals lineup going up against Bobby Miller. I am intrigued by the Bobby Miller spot today. 8,900, 9,800. Wish he was at the DK price on the FanDuel slate, but I'll take him at 98 because that's going to probably limit the ownership exposure, I would have to think. Premium pitching prospect. Kid's been up in the show a little bit longer than some of the other prospects, like the guy he's going to be facing in this one, who's making his debut. 6 starts, 32 2/3, 22.6% strikeouts. Walked a few too many so far at 9.5%, but limiting hard hits, limiting premium contact, finding a decent strikeout rate so far, with probably more to come. He's got excellent stuff. Grades out really well by Stuff Plus metrics. 4.13 ERA, 4.07 xFIP. Just really good pitcher. Young pitcher finding his way so far in the show. But if nobody else is going to it, or if the field is limited to where I think they should be with how he projects for me, I like this spot. We know there are tons of strikeouts in the Royals lineup. We've targeted it with similar pitching prospect type kids, some low end veterans we've targeted the Royals with to moderate at least success this year. They do have power up top, so you got to fade Prado, Bobby Witt, Sal Perez, and then like the contact that MJ Melendez generates, but he hasn't been hitting home runs. We do have this lineup. Let me see. The Dodgers lineup looks, I think, exactly like what I had on screen. So it is Peralta, Hayward, James Outman, Miguel Rojas at the bottom of the lineup, and then I'll drop the Royals lineup in as we talk about it. But yeah, I want to get to shares of Bobby Miller. Tons of strikeouts for these Royals. If you get through the Prado, Perez, Melendez, Prado's not there. Let's talk about the actual. If you get through the Bobby Witt, Melendez, Sal Perez part of the lineup up top, you're kind of cruising. You've got some high strikeout rates. Prado is in the lineup, and he's hitting 5th, 36.4% strikeout rate for him, 5 home runs on the year, a 146 ISO now. Kid who I think is over time going to figure it out and be a productive hitter, but has kind of scuffled so far this season despite a decent contact profile. Witt is a star, but doesn't get on base nearly enough. 286 on base. He's just got to improve that, and then his run creation mark is going to be in the, I don't know, like 115 plus range for WRC plus. He just doesn't get on. But 12 home runs, 23 stolen bases. He does what we need him to do for DFS purposes anyway. Melendez, all the contact profile that I always talk about, but still only 6 home runs, a 129 ISO. It is difficult to only hit 6 home runs and have a 129 ISO when you've got a 10.9% barrel rate and a 50.5% hard hit rate. That just doesn't jibe. Those are both coming down. Those were both higher earlier in the season. So far, it seems like the low ISO, the low home run total is more the true story here. We'll see if he can turn it, but it hasn't been great for Melendez. Strikes out like a 30% clip. He's cheap, so you can go there. He's got his catcher eligibility back on FanDuel, which is kind of interesting. So you can go to Melendez if you're stacking Royals, but it's not great. Definite opportunity for Miller to find some strikeouts there. Sal Perez, obviously a star power hitter as a catcher, 15 home runs on the season. And then his back end with Michael Garcia, he's been moderately effective, but sitting at 84 WRC plus, 260, 314, 358. We're not worried about Michael Garcia, Freddie Freeman, Kyle Isbell, Drew Waters, Nicky Lopez. Are these even major league players? I mean, I know all those names, but like, is any one of those guys an intimidating presence at the plate? I think Bobby Miller's got an opportunity to cruise in this spot. Could get dinged, but when we're playing probability instead of possibility, like I said before, I think Bobby Miller's got a decent amount of probability on his side to put up a good start here. So enthusiasm about the Dodgers, they'll be popular, but it's totally worth it, totally warranted. Maybe a few Alec Marsh DK shares at 4,000. I think it's viable at that price. It's a deadly bad matchup for it. You don't want to do that against the Dodgers, but at least the price is at that 4,000. Like if they had him even in like 5,200 or at Austin Gomber's price, I would just be saying, nah, let's just wait for him in a better spot. At 4, maybe you get away with it. Treat it like it's Coors Field. And then the Royals bats is, meh, low priority. All right, Coors Field. Let's talk about Austin Gomber. Let's talk about Michael Lorenzen. I think between the two, Lorenzen is actually the better play, by the way. 6,400, 8,200 is just really bad pricing. But he's the moderately better pitcher, at least right now. 18.6% strikeouts, over 77 innings, 13 starts, 3.97 ERA, 4.36 xFIP. Last year, 97 and 2/3 in 18 starts, 4.24 ERA, 4.20 xFIP, 20.7% strikeouts. Gomber last year, 5.56 ERA, 4.19 xFIP. Year before that, 4.53 ERA, 4.17 xFIP, 23.2% strikeouts. That was, I believe, before he came to Colorado. And then this is in Colorado, if I remember correctly. Was he in Colorado last year? I forget. Austin Gomber. Obviously, I didn't look too deeply into this spot because I didn't think I'd have to talk about it. He was in Colorado last year. He was in Colorado in 21 as well, actually. All right, so those 115 and a third were in Colorado in 21 as well. So was decent this year in Colorado, but has been bad for basically a full season's worth of starts in more recent memory. I don't love the opportunity for Austin Gomber here. We are talking about a lefty going up against the Tigers. That is always a good spot. Tigers over the course of the season are sitting toward the bottom of the board when we look at their active roster against lefties, which FanDuel or Fangraphs isn't loading up quickly enough for me right now. Get to the split. Come on. Love Fangraphs. Sometimes you run into a little bit of processing issue. Here we go. Fired right up. So 20th overall by WRC Plus with a 104 collective WRC Plus against lefties, a 183 ISO against lefties, 21.3% strikeout rate. Detroit's better against lefties. I would stop very short of saying that they're good against lefties, but Detroit is better against lefties. You're dealing with Matt Vierling, who's actually gotten most of these numbers in his quality this year against fellow righties in a weird split situation, but he'll be on the correct side of platoons in a vacuum outside of what he's done on the short sample this year. Torkelson, kind of cheap, 4,000, 3,100 at first base. I've mentioned him a few times in terms of he's kind of sneakily coming on a little bit at the plate, finally. 11.9% barrels, 47.9% hard hits, Still strikes out at a decently high clip at 23.9, but 9.9% on the walks is okay. He was around those numbers last year, up to 11 home runs, 94 WRC plus. There's a little bit to believe in with the improved contact profile for Torkelson. This is the important part. Barrels are up. Hard hits are way up. If he can continue that and just be one of these guys that, hey, I don't hit for average, but when I do put bat on ball, ball goes, I think he's perfectly fine here, especially 4,000, 3,100 in Coors Field. I'm inclined to go to more Tigers than I am Austin Gomber. My Gomber shares will be 0 on FanDuel. I think it's probably the better decision to leave him at 0 on DK. I don't see a good path to success. He could get there. He is not likely to get there. Lorenzen, same story. And at higher prices, it's even less justifiable. He could get there. The Rockies are bad. The Rockies are bad against right-handed pitching. He's been better between these two pitchers, but not good. So for me, this one's just all bats. I don't really want to... I won't tell anybody to take somebody out of their lineup. If you've got a great-looking lineup with Austin Gomber in it, I might say see what happens if you switch to that $4,000 kid. Maybe you can replace a 6-hitter with like Mookie Betts. Maybe. Or you wouldn't want to do that with Mookie Betts against that kid with Ronald Acuna. So I just think there's value in looking in other directions for your value pitching today. It's Coors Field. Even with bad teams here, bad lineups can beat bad pitching, I think, in a lot of cases. So I'm more inclined to look to the Tigers. Obviously, they're very limited. Do we have the final version? We do. Vierling, Torkelson, Ibanez, Baez, Jake Rogers hitting 5th, Miggy, McKinstry, Short, Marisnik. That is in no way a good lineup in the year 2023. If we could travel back in time, grab some Javi Baez from 5 years ago, some Miggy Cabrera from 10 years ago, now we're talking. They'd probably be hitting higher in the lineup at higher prices. There's not a lot to love. But if I am going to Tigers, it's Vierling, Torkelson, Ibanez off the top, and then I'm mixing in maybe some shares of Javi, maybe some shares of Jake Rogers. On DK, Jake Rogers is more valuable, 4,000 at a catcher hitting 5th at Coors Field. That's definitely got some value, but let's be realistic about who he is. 197, 299, 458. Does have 10 home runs, does have a 261 ISO and a good contact profile, 35.2% strikeouts, free swinger of a catcher. So it's important to be realistic about the opportunity for Rogers, but that's a good lineup spot and a good price on DK for that hitter. Zach Short has been good against lefties this season. Marisnik is not that good overall. McKinstry, left-hand, the only lefty in the lineup, but has been productive overall this season. It's the Tigers, but it's Coors Field. The Rockies are the exact same read. It's the Rockies, but it's Coors Field. They're typically lower owned than their opponents. They're in a similarly good matchup in terms of the pitcher. So I do see upside for the Rockies. Projected to get Chris Bryant back, that would be a major, major boost to this lineup. Hopefully they'd be smart enough to put Tovar in the leadoff spot and let Profar hit 7th or 9th. We've talked about that quite a bit. I don't think anybody's got a mistaken impression of what I think of Jurickson Profar at this point in his career. But Bryant is good. McMahon against the righty is certainly viable here. Elias Diaz, CJ Cron, definitely viable. Nolan Jones against a righty, definite upside here. So I kind of like the Rockies a little bit better, I think, than the Tigers if they get Chris Bryant back. If you've got Bryant, McMahon, CJ Cron, and Nolan Jones in the heart of that lineup, that's a decent run creation engine with a good amount of power, good amount of premium contact upside, going up against kind of a nothing pitcher. I expect the Rockies will get some ownership, but with like the Dodgers, the Braves, the Angels, a lot of other teams drawing some away from Coors Field, it might be a sneaky good spot for quality here. Coors is never going to be sneaky, but it might be lower owned than it maybe should be in this spot, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Bottom of the lineup, if you get Tovar down there, he's semi-playable from the 7th spot. I would just so much rather have him in the leadoff spot. Harold Castro, mix and match piece, multi-position eligible. Brenton Doyle, same thing. 6 homers, 11 steals for Doyle, but sitting 40% below average for run creation. So again, another guy, it's very important to be realistic about what we're getting from some of these guys in terms of the reliable nature of the output. The idea that they're probably going to be more apt to put a 0 in your lineup in 3 or 4 plate appearances than they are a home run and 2 stolen bases. So definite interest in bats on both sides. I'm not going to pitching. If you want to grab those Gomber shares, whoever that was that asked, so be it. But I think I've done my part to at least warn you off from maybe rostering those. Let's see. Chuck says Gomber was decent last year, especially away from Coors. He had a few 8K non-run games last season. Yeah, and, that's, like I've said a few times recently, that's the important thing to remember about these league average, or in his case, below average pitchers, is that 5 times a year for a below average guy, 10 times a year for an average guy, they'll give you a decent start. It's not like they're inept. It's not like they're major league pitchers who make millions of dollars for a reason. If they were facing you and me, they would blow us away, and it would be one of those Steve Nebraska type starts. 81 pitches, all of them strikes, 27 up, 27 down. Perfect game. But he's not facing us, and he is pitching in Coors Field. That's the give and take. So yeah, it's not a great spot in my opinion here for pitching in Coors Field. Betts, Freeman, and Will Smith were all 6K, and JD Muncy like 55. Detroit doesn't deserve big salaries. I totally agree. Yeah, Detroit does not deserve big prices. The fact that they're this cheap at Coors Field is probably going to lead some people to them for sure. On both sides, really, the Tigers and the Rockies. Rockies more expensive by a fairly wide margin, though. That's a very good point that Joe Kotarski brings up there. Appreciate that, Joe. That's a really good talking point, because that will probably enhance the scenario where the Tigers are a little bit more popular in the Coors Field game than their opponents, than the hometown Rockies. And I continue to think that Rockies lineup is probably a little bit more talented, probably a little bit deeper, in, if not an equally bad pitching or an equally good matchup against the pitcher, at least not that much worse of a spot against the pitcher. You're dealing with the home team, so potentially fewer plate appearances, but I think there's as much upside for Rockies at higher prices. So interesting point by Joe there. Jake Swale says if you're game log watching, Gomber has like 4 straight starts of 13 plus points. Does he? What's he done in his recent outings? 523. And we're looking at Austin Gomber's game logs. I love this show. Let's see. Last time out at Los Angeles to face the Angels. 3 strikeouts, 2 earned, 5 innings. That was in Coors Field. So that was 5 fairly clean innings, 2 earned runs, only 3 strikeouts, 1 walk. At Cincinnati, 5 1/3, 3 home runs allowed, 4 earned runs, 5 hits, 6 strikeouts. 6 innings at Boston, 3 earned runs, no homers, 5 strikeouts. 4 innings at Coors against the Pods, 7 earned runs, 1 strikeout. 2 2/3 at Kansas City, 2 earned, 4 strikeouts, 3 walks. Came out early in that one. Wasn't terrible in 2 2/3. I'm not sure if something happened to him or what the case was there. Last start in May at Coors against the Mets. So 4 straight starts through May, the 12th, the 17th, 23rd, and 28th, all at Coors Field. That's an interesting sample to look at if we're game log hunting. The Mets in the last one, 4 innings, 6 earned runs, 3 strikeouts, 1 home run allowed. 2 strikeouts in 5 2/3 against the Marlins, 3 earned runs, a home run allowed. 6 2/3 against the Phillies, 3 earned runs, 2 home runs allowed, 6 strikeouts in that one. That was the only good strikeout game in that bunch. So you got a lot of games of really, really low strikeout totals, and then that question mark about whether he can even book you the clean innings. It's really thin. You're only hunting for a handful of points. I mean, that's the apt response to making that argument is, I only need a little bit, but it's really, really thin. 24% strikeout rate away from Coors over 2 seasons. Okay, I am with you on that, Chuck. There's more upside when he's not pitching in Coors. He's in Coors tonight. So yeah, that's and I know you're not. I know that's not the trying to come back against me or anything here. I know we're having a dialogue about the opportunity, but I don't see it. It's a little thin for my tastes. Cue the Austin Gomber CGSO in Coors Field. Austin Gomber, perfect game, inbound. 12 strikeouts, perfect game against the Tigers. That also could happen, right? If we're talking about could happen versus likely to happen, that could happen. It's probably almost as likely that the stadium gets obliterated by an asteroid, or Cthulhu comes up from the sea and makes his way to Colorado and swallows Coors Field whole. All these things are possible, but not likely. All right, let's move on. My Yankees. Cardinals. Yanks bats have come to life a little bit over the last couple of games. Not that we're, making any decisions based on that. But there should be a fair amount of contact here against Matthew Liberatore. Liberatore, highly regarded pitching prospect who does well in the minors and then kind of falls apart at the major league level so far. Chuck says no opportunity. I'm just saying he was good-ish at some point. Then this season happened and he's been atrocious. Yeah, and Gomber was a pitcher who it sucked that he landed in Colorado because I think there is potential there if he was in just a regular situation. But pitchers just die when they go to Colorado. Going all the way back to Mike Hampton when he decided to move to Colorado because the schools were better instead of re-signing with the Mets back in the day. So I was talking Liberatore. He actually projects okay in the model here. As you can see, there's certainly strikeouts in the Yankees lineup. He's got the, I believe, talent to get there, but he's just never done it at the major league level yet. 16% this year in 27 and a third, 6 starts, 5.68 xFIP, 5.60 ERA. Last year, 17.4% strikeouts. Walks too many at the major league level so far. 11.2 last year, 10.7 this year, giving up all this premium contact. Hasn't turned into home runs this year, but kind of did a little bit more last year in the small sample. But just with the idea of all this contact, this lack of strikeouts, all these walks, going up against the Yankees lineup that, for all their flaws, still knows how to work a walk at least. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. These walk rates suck this year. All right, never mind. I'm wrong about the walks. Glaber's been walking at a decent clip. But yeah, all right, so the Yanks maybe don't draw the walks, but I think with all the contact viable there, I think with all the contact that he's likely to allow, and with the possibility of additional walks and a couple guys getting on base ahead of the big knocks like Stanton and Rizzo, I think there's some upside here for the Yankees. Stanton, if he puts bat on ball against this kid, is probably going to smoke one. He hits the ball so hard. He's struggling with his timing. He's struggling at putting bat on ball. 198, 260, 413 in 131 plate appearances. 7 home runs at 215 ISO. A 52.3% hard hit rate, 16.3% barrels. And now Giancarlo Stanton only costs $4,500, $2,900. There's a lot of upside there. The Yanks are showing good value. They're not one of the top projected overall teams, but they're showing good value scores because guys like Stanton and guys like Rizzo are so cheap from site to site in a matchup against a kid who's going to be allowing contact. Liberatore could come out and put up a good start for value. I do believe there's talent, like I said. I do believe that he can find his strikeouts at the major league level at some point. This is a decent spot to do it against the flawed version of the Yankees. You've got obvious strikeout upside against Josh Donaldson. He's just selling out for either I'm going to hit a home run or I'm going to strike out with 6 swings in one of those Bugs Bunny type plate appearances. But Donaldson's been crushing the ball when he makes contact too. So that's a either or kind of a matchup. I think Liberatore could strike him out a few times. I think Donaldson could be in play for a home run ball today. Who is Cthulhu? Oh, Cthulhu. It's I the spelling threw me there. I thought it was I thought you were asking about a player. Yeah, Cthulhu's like an ancient sea demon, kind of like the Kraken. He's a Lovecraft creation. H.P. Lovecraft, the old horror writer. So he's like the precursor, or not even the precursor to the idea of the Kraken, but similar idea, ancient elder beast from the deep, big kaiju looking thing with a lot of yeah. So he comes from the sea. It's Kthulu, I believe, Cthulhu. So when you wrote who is Cthulhu, I was like, oh, what team is he on? Never heard that name before. So Yanks on the other side on with Sevy on the hill. That's an interesting spot. Another one, I think I'm going to kind of temper that pitching projection. Comes through the model okay because there's a lot of history with Sevy when he's healthy for pitching well, finding strikeouts, limiting runs, being a fairly good pitcher. What I'm concerned with is he hasn't really been that so far this season. 19.5% strikeout rate, only 7.9% swinging, 24.7% CSW. I think I'm in a spot with Sevy where I kind of want to see it before I start going to it. That his lack of output this year, combined with all the premium contact that he's been allowing in the short sample, combined with Aaron Boone's short hook, kind of concerns me about the Severino start. They're also just kind of trying to protect him because he's just so frequently injured that I think 5 innings from Sevy, if he gets into trouble in the 5th, you get him hooked. If he gets into trouble in the 6th, you certainly get a hook. If he's in the 6th, we're probably okay. We've probably paid off a $7,400, $7,500 salary. It's that fifth inning hook that I worry about. It's the lack of strikeouts that I worry about. And it's also all this quality in the Cards lineup that I worry about. There's a lot of good hitters there. I know they've been rocky for most of the season. I know that even DFS-wise, they've been up and down for most of the season. That's also why we're getting them as cheap as we are. So it's Power says Profar's leading off for Colorado. I tell you, that is a poorly run organization right now. A lot of MLB The Show gamers out there in the world could probably run that organization a little bit better. Donovan, Goldschmidt, Nootbaar, Arenado. That's a great core of 4 hitters off the top of the lineup here for St. Louis. Another lineup where this is kind of an exemplar for, do I really want to say that Donovan and Nootbaar are better plays than Arenado just because Arenado hits in the cleanup spot? The average sweeps up a lot of those spots, but it's important when talking about that to be careful about these all-stars, these superstars who hit 4th, who hit 5th. You don't want to cast a net over 50 shares of Cardinals and only come up with 5 shares of Nolan Arenado. So that's where the nuance of that discussion that I was mentioning before gets important. But I think it's a good spot. I think you can definitely roster some cards against Sevy here. A few shares of Sevy at 74 on DK is certainly not out of the question. 75 on FanDuel, I'm going to need those strikeouts or I'm going to need that quality start. I don't know how much I go to it on FanDuel. Excuse me. I've got like a burp lingering in here. That's like, one of those ones that doesn't force its own way out, that like if I wasn't on a show right now, I would like kind of suck in some air and try and burp, but it's just not coming all the way through, but not going all the way back down. It keeps on bubbling up on me as I'm talking. It's important information. So the cards, Donovan, Goldschmidt, Nootbaar, Forshaw in play, Arenado in play. Wilson Contreras hasn't been great this season. 8 home runs, 215, 303, 369, 11% worse than average creating runs. But still all these barrels, all these hard hits against a guy who's been giving them up, not striking people out this year. At least on DK as a $4,200 catcher, there's value there. If you're on FanDuel, do you go to him over a Jordan Walker or a Nolan Gorman? Based on the batting order position, sure, the cost at $2,800 is fine. But I believe in the abilities, I think, of Walker and Gorman a little bit more. Gorman's going to be a rocky roller coaster of a hitter with low batting average, but tons and tons of power over time. I think he's going to come, another guy going to come roaring back to life in terms of his power output, and we will just want to be ahead of the curve when it happens. He's going to come back to life with like a 2 home run day, and I want to have him in my lineups when he does. So Nolan Gorman at 46, 29 can definitely be my second baseman, specifically when I'm going to Cardinals. It sucks that he and Donovan play the same spot on the FanDuel slate because I don't necessarily want to build one of them into the util instead of somebody else. But I think I probably lean into some shares of Gorman ahead of some shares of Donovan for only 200 more on the FanDuel slate. Even though Donovan's the better correlated scoring play with Goldschmidt, Nootbaar, Arenado, and going to see more additional plate appearances. Just more individual upside, more slate bending, slate breaking upside out of Gorman. More 2 home run upside out of Gorman. Jordan Walker's been really good, over 160 plate appearances. Went back down on the minors after struggling the first few weeks of the season, but came back to life. 306, 375, 472, 6 homers, 3 steals. Productive player. Not a guy people are getting to in droves still. Fills the outfield, 3,200, 3,000. Was probably more effective as when he had the infield eligibility. Kind of an also-ran type guy as an outfielder, but a productive bat so far. If you're going to Cards, you certainly don't want to skip them too many times. DeYoung and Edman, capable guys at the bottom. Trey says, other than LAD Miller, I feel like pitching is just pick and pray. Yeah, there's a lot of pick and pray in the mid-range today. Like I talked about at the top of the show, it's a slate that's more broad than it is tall, broader than it is tall. A lot of guys just kind of in that mid-range. A lot of guys of like 20-ish% strikeout rates. Could get you there, but bad matchup types. So yeah, I think it's a slate that dictates casting kind of a wide net over pitching and taking your lumps where you take them, and then hopefully getting to the right spots in combination with the right bats on some of those pitchers. Speaking of which, Griff Canning. In a better matchup, I think Griff Canning would definitely be in that pool, at least on DK for 83. He's been pitching well this season. 3.99 ERA, matching 3.99 xFIP, 22.9% strikeouts, 6.3% walks, 12.2% swing, 29.2% CSW. He gives up a little bit of premium contact and power, 46.8% on the hard hits, 91 miles an hour, or almost 92 miles an hour of exit velo. That definitely supports the idea that these home runs are real, the 4.06% home runs. What I don't like about the spot here is, in addition to the power that he's given up, just the lack of strikeouts in this Diamondbacks lineup. They've been very good at limiting strikeouts all season long. They've been very productive at the plate all season long. The question is whether we had Corbin Carroll in the lineup. He came out of the game the other day, or I don't know if he came out or if he was just like after the game was experiencing shoulder soreness. I forget what it is. But he had shoulder surgery 2 years ago and is experiencing shoulder soreness. So I think they're going to be really, really careful with him here. I doubt that he's in the lineup. We probably get something like this projected version, which is still good enough at limiting strikeouts. You can see everybody in the top 6 below 20% strikeouts for the season in not extremely small samples of plate appearances. Like, we obviously, to make a lot of decisions, we want more than 150, 160 plate appearances, even more than 331, 334. But for evaluating where this lineup is in terms of strikeouts, that's pretty reasonable. So I think there's difficulty finding the strikeouts for Canning. The idea that the Diamondbacks have been a productive team in terms of run creation, if not power. And there's plenty of power here. Marte, Christian Walker, Lourdes Gurriel at least. So I don't love the spot for Griff Canning, even on a short slate. I think you do work him into your DK player pool as one of the mid-range SP2s, but I don't expect a great performance here. I think you could get that serviceable performance on DK. The FanDuel price at 93 is just a little out of line. You can see it in the projection, 23.4. Like, that's not a great projection. It's a playable one, but it's not great. And at 93, I think there's just other options to go to. So I really don't like it on the FanDuel slate. DK is a lot more playable. Diamondbacks coming back the other way. I think I can get into some shares of this team, but without Carroll, it's a major downgrade at the top of the lineup. So we're looking at Marte and Christian Walker as our 2 stars up there. I can make an argument that maybe they go lead off Marte, or actually, no, you don't even need to do that. You can keep Perdomo in the leadoff spot, go Marte, and then just let's slide Lourdes Gurriel and his excellent hit tool up to where Pavin Smith is as our 3-hitter. Let Smith hit 5th, or even Emmanuel Rivera hit 5th, Smith 6th, and then this bottom end. I think that's a more effective way to build this lineup. We'll see what they do, but I like these 2 hitters where they're priced 48-34, 43-3,000 for those 2 hitters with their power, with their very high quality hit tools for guys with this much power. 281, 345, 529 for Walker, 271, 323, 487 for Lourdes Gurriel, both in double digits, 16 and 12 home runs, both supporting it with decent hard hit rates, both limit strikeouts. I really like those 2 power bats in terms of these guys put bat on ball very, very well for guys that have as much power upside as they do. Smith is viable at cheap prices, but you can see well below the Mendoza line at 190, but does have some power and was a guy who was kind of well regarded for his hit tool when he was coming up a few years ago as a prospect. Never really connected at the major league level, but when he gets opportunities for DFS anyway, for 29, 27, he's viable, especially if he's hitting 2nd, 3rd, 5th. The bottom end, Thomas, McCarthy, good for counting stats in small doses. McCarthy's kind of come on since he got recalled. You can see the average is up to 250, 315 on base, up to 17 stolen bases. He's been more productive since he came back. Another candidate potentially for the leadoff spot today. It'll be interesting to see how this lineup falls, but kind of limited interest in Diamondbacks bats just because Canning has been effective enough. But I think you can go there in small doses. They're like a mid-priority stack for me, I think. The Angels on the other side are a high priority stack. Major opportunity going up against Tommy Henry. Tons and tons of power coming through the model. Trout and Ohtani are obvious superstars. Nobody needs to sell anybody shares of Trout and Ohtani. Taylor Ward, roller coaster of a player, but 4,300, 2,800 in the right spot to correlate with Trout and Ohtani. Have to like some shares of Taylor Ward, specifically when going to Angels. He's not a guy I would necessarily like, I need a one-off for 2,800 in my outfield. I'm going to Taylor Ward. You can, but I'd probably, if I was making that decision, I'd say, hopefully I've got 29 and I can go to Hunter Renfroe instead. If I had to go to an Angel. And there's a lot of similarly priced outfielders with upside that aren't quite the roller coaster that Taylor Ward is. But he does have power. He's got 9 home runs on the season. He had 23 last year, 44.1% hard hit rate. Only strikes out at a 20.6% clip. Was good for strikeouts last year. Walked more last year. So for correlated scoring ahead of Ohtani and Trout, that's a dynamite buy. Brandon Drury, Hunter Renfroe, tremendous home run upside from both of those guys. Drury's my overall home run pick for the day. 10.90. I went with the guy. Out of the guys above the magic number in this lineup, I went with the guy at the lowest point, just because I feel like Drury will probably be less owned than Trout and Ohtani, and I like making more interesting picks. Obviously, Trout and Ohtani have a better chance at a home run. Probably Renfroe as well at 15 in the model. Both Drury and Renfroe, 14 homers on the season. Tremendous right-handed pop against Tommy Henry, who has given up a 4.14% home run rate, despite actually a really good hard hit rate at 30.5%, 86.5 miles an hour of average exit velo. Just doesn't strike anybody out, allows way too much contact. Fly ball pitcher. There's just tremendous home run upside for the Angels here. Eduardo Escobar, if you get him late in the lineup, switch hitter, 3,300, 2,500, hit 4 home runs so far this season in 137 plate appearances. Played his way out of Queens, not a Met anymore. But over the past 2 seasons, 2021 and 2022 combined, 48 home runs. That's a pretty viable DFS hitter in my opinion. Above average for run creation both years, a 219 ISO 2 years ago, down to 190 last year, only 20 home runs. But that's a totally viable power bat who's going to hit from both sides of the plate. Second base and third base on DK. Third base only on FanDuel kind of sucks. Second base and third base on DK for 3,300. Eduardo Escobar is totally viable here. Good team for him to have landed on. Luis Rengifo, cheap, multi-position eligible, guy with some power. Hasn't done much this season, but did have a decent season for sneaky power late in this lineup last year. Chad Wallach, good bat on ball skills, 13.3% barrels, 6 home runs and 102 plate appearances for Wallach. So if he's in the lineup as your catcher, I think that's a viable bat. He's better when he's hitting like up here in the lineup, but he'll probably be down here with the addition of Escobar here. So enthusiasm about the Angels. Mid-range stack priority for the Diamondbacks, high priority for the Angels. No real interest in Griff Canning on FanDuel. Some as a probably too high priced SP2 option on the DK slate in this spot. No interest in Tommy Henry. 2 games to go. This one flew by. That's good that it's 2 games to go because it's 5:43. I didn't actually realize that we've been talking for quite so long, gang. This has been a fun one. White Sox with Tanner Banks on the hill. Banks is an opener, but he's going to be a multi-inning opener. Probably 3 innings. Could go as low as 1. Could not even reach 1 if he gets tattooed by the Athletics here. But I don't think I want to go to the Tanner Banks play, even at 5,000 on the DK slate. 57 on FanDuel. He projects to here because that's a 4.5 inning projection that my model just puts a bottom end on there. So I don't really believe he's going quite that high. 23% strikeouts, though. 4.50 ERA, 4.42 on the xFIP, 5.4% walks. Has allowed a lot of premium contact in the short sample. 15.7% barrels, 18 degrees of launch, 47.1% hard hits, 93.5 miles an hour of exit velo. If we're saying 90 is the magic number, that is an aggressively high average exit velocity. It's just good for him that this game's in the Coliseum and he's facing the Athletics. So I expect probably just a few clean innings, maybe a few strikeouts. It's tough to recommend that though in my shoes here. I don't want to push those plays too often. This is more a spot where like I won't talk you out of that opener for 5,000 on DK kind of a play with the idea that he might go 3, but it's not really one for me. And I'm all about making sharp, interesting plays like that. Chris Bryant activated for from the injured list in the lineup for the Rockies, by the way. I'm all about making sharp plays like that. I'm all about using interesting options and using cheap pitchers with upside. It's just, it gets a little dicey around these potentially limited major question mark type opportunities. So I don't love that. Luis Medina on the other side, good luck if you roster him as your pitcher. 5% home runs, 44.6% hard hits, 90.4 miles an hour exit velo, 20.5% on the strikeouts, 6.84 ERA, 4.88 xFIP, walks too many at 11.8%. Seems likely to feed some run creation opportunities and some power back toward the White Sox in this spot. So I think I'm going to get, maybe not carried away with White Sox bats, but I think I'm going to get to a fairly decent portion of White Sox here. There were another team that was projected, or implied rather, for more than 5 runs in Vegas today. So good opportunity for home run upside from Luis Robert, Eloy Jimenez, Andrew Vaughn, Jake Berger, Gavin Sheets. Several of those guys, or 2 of those guys anyway, in Luis Robert and Jake Berger over the magic number for home runs. Eloy Jimenez just below it. Vaughn has a good power bat, 48.5% hard hits, 10.5% barrels, up to 12 home runs now, a 203 ISO after not a cold start, but a start where he was more hit tool focused and not hitting for as much power. So he's kind of pulled the power game together a little bit. The average has dipped a little bit, the on base has dipped, but I prefer him here hitting for power, especially at 3,200, 3,000. Fills first base kind of nicely there. Berger, the power output with 17 home runs in 231 plate appearances. We've talked about that was one of those weird outbursts from a player who will never have a month that good again the rest of his career, but it was a great month. Right now, you can still roster him with the idea of the occasional home run. I don't think he's going to be completely dead at the plate the rest of the year, but I don't believe he's the hitter that we saw earlier in the season. Gavin Sheets at the bottom, lefty power. Elvis Andrus sucks. Your qualities from 3, 4, 5, and then you used to get a lot of quality out of Andrew Benintendi and Tim Anderson at the top of the lineup. Benintendi's pulled himself up to a 100 WRC plus, 284, 349, 372, starting to get on base more. Hit tool focused guy, can steal you a base, can drive one over the wall infrequently, but has not really been that hitter at all this season. 1 home run on the year and 316 plate appearances. You can see the hard hits down more than 10 points. Barrels down 2 points. So Benny hasn't been great, but has kind of pulled himself together for being a slap hitting oriented leadoff hitter. We'll see how well he correlates the rest of the year with the Lou Bobs and the Eloys of the world. Timmy is the concern. At least you get him at second base and shortstop on DK now at 39. Shortstop only at 25. It's a great buy in terms of star caliber player, all-star at an extreme discount, but he's been bad. 248 plate appearances now, no home runs, 8 steals, .038 ISO, 49 WRC plus, 231, 270, 269. I mean, that is just not Tim Anderson. Last year, 301, 339, 395, .093 ISO, 6 home runs, 13 stolen bases, and 351. That wasn't even Tim Anderson, but at least the batting average was there. At least he was getting on base. At least he was creating runs 10% better than average, not 51% below. Year before, all-star, 17 homers, 18 stolen bases, 309, 338, 469, 159 ISO, created runs 20% better than average. That's the player I want back. That's the player my dynasty team needs back. Right now, assuming he's hitting second, I think in this matchup, you can absolutely go to shares of Tim Anderson and be happy that he's discounted. But this is one of those ones where, like, I don't necessarily think that it's Tim Anderson's discounted because he's been playing bad but will come roaring back to life at some point. I think Tim Anderson's probably just playing hurt, playing through something, giving us plate appearances and toughing it out, but not in a great spot here. Missed some time early in the season with injury too, so it's, there's support for that. Not great for Tim right now, but will be a part of my White Sox plans in limited doses. The A's, hate this team. At least Esteury Ruiz is back in the leadoff spot. We can say that much. 40 stolen bases on the year. Give the kid the opportunity. Like I was saying yesterday, it's the one good thing this team has got going on for it. Who cares if he's not that great in terms of being a leadoff man in general? Just give him the extra plate appearances. Let him chase 100 stolen bases. What do you have to lose, Oakland? A couple fans when you move to Vegas? I mean, come on. Jordan Diaz, Carlos Perez, Brent Rooker, JJ Bleday, Alemys Diaz, Shea Langoliers, Jace Peterson, Tony Kemp. So we don't even get Noda in the lineup today. I know there's a lefty opening the game, but come on. He's one of the few guys on this team that gets on base, can hit for a little bit of power. It's a very bad version of this lineup. If you go to it, go to Ruiz, Diaz, Perez, Rooker, maybe some JJ Bleday. If you're on DK, maybe Shea Langoliers is a sneaky catcher power bat. This is a bad team. It's not a good matchup, not like it's an intimidating matchup by any means. But if you get the idea of Banks shutting him down for 3 innings and then get into the bullpen that has some effective arms, it's not great. I don't like this spot for the A's. Bad hitting park, just not a good spot. So enthusiasm for the White Sox. No real pitching to speak of in this game. Maybe a couple shares of top end A's, but very, very limited in the A's. And then oddly, one of the best, most productive run-scoring teams in the league is in one of the best pitching matchups of the day. I think we can get both pitchers in this one. Still don't want to come out. I think we can get both pitchers in this one. $11K for Shane McClanahan. You're paying full freight, but it's totally worth it. 27.5% strikeout rate in the projected version of the Mariners lineup. We've been chasing strikeouts with this team just like with the Twins. They've got quality. We know that Julio's a good player. Ty France, Teoscar Hernandez, Eugenio Suarez. We know they've got good players in this lineup, But a lefty going up against this team limits them in terms of no Jared Kelenic, no Cal Raleigh in the projected version of the lineup. They may or may not play, but it's going to limit the lefties. Raleigh's a switch hitter, but it's going to limit Jared Kelenic. It's going to limit J.P. Crawford up at the top of the game, top of the lineup. Julio's been bad in terms of his strikeouts this year. The counting stats are fine, but the triple slash isn't. The ISO isn't. Ty France, good hitter, limit strikeouts. So really you're getting Crawford and France to limit strikeouts, and then everybody else mid-20s or above, basically. It's a high strikeout lineup. There's plenty of opportunity for McClanahan. He's worked this year at 26.7% strikeouts, 2.23 ERA, 3.74 xFIP. The xFIP's notably higher than the ERA, but he's been pitching effectively overall. Couple bumps in the road from time to time, but has been decent at limiting home runs, despite a little bit of barrels, a little bit of hard hits. Pitches home games in a pitcher's park, but isn't a pitcher's park in this one, so I see no real difference there. I like the spot for McClanahan, even at 11,000. You can take a few shots at him with Mariners bats. Hope that you find the home run upside. Hope you get into the bullpen, but it's not like their bullpen's all that bad. It's not like they're getting excellent opportunities with the Mariners. So tepid interest in the Julios, Francis, Teoscars, and Suarez's of the world. If it is this bottom end with Murphy, Pollock, Dylan Moore, Jose Caballero, that's a extreme take or leave kind of a bottom end. If you build out 50 stacks of Mariners for some reason, sure, you can grab those guys, mix them in, blend them in with the top end of the lineup, but that's a pretty weak bottom end that kind of just supports the strikeouts. On the other side, the Rays against Bryce Miller is a potential inflection point for the slate. Like, I think that the Rays could certainly put a bendy total on Bryce Miller here, but I think he's got the opportunity to pitch a pretty good game at what I can't imagine is going to be good high ownership. 9,200, 9,100, the price is right. He's got some strikeout potential. He limits walks. He limits run creation opportunities. 3.88 ERA, 4.13 on the xFIP, 0.97 whip, keeps guys off base. Not a premium strikeout option, or at least hasn't been so far while he's figuring it out over 10 starts at the major league level, but has put up some good games. It's a deadly bad matchup. The Rays have been really, really good this year. I think you want to roster some shares of Rays for every share of Bryce Miller that you grab. Grab a share of Rays in the other lineup. I almost just spilled a whole cup of coffee. I was letting the coffee cup kind of do this in my hand as my mind was wandering when I was talking. So the coffee cup was swaying like this. And then without thinking, I kind of just tipped my hand backward and just almost just covered myself in half a cup of very cold coffee. Wouldn't have mattered, just would have been silly to watch. So, yeah, some Miller shares at a little bit of coffee on my hand. Miller shares at 92, 91, projects well. It's not a safe spot with how good the Rays have been. Yandy Diaz, all-star off the top of the Rays lineup, 4,900, 3,800, still multi-position on FanDuel. Tons of run creation just up and down for the Rays. The average WRC plus for, we'll include Bethancourt. Even with Bethancourt 78, the average WRC plus for this entire projected lineup is 132. If we exclude Bethancourt, it jumps to 139. That's just bonkers. Top four hitters, 151. So the top four hitters are each half again better than average for run creation. So you get, six hitters worth of value out of those four hitters? It's pretty good. That's why they're so expensive, but they're really productive. I expect Raleigh will be one of the more popular hitters in the lineup if he's hitting third or in third through fifth, let's say. Tons of power, tons of output, still very cheap prices. Correlates well with Diaz, Franco, Rosarena. Those are your stars, those three guys. Diaz this year is a star, has been an all-star. Came into the year as a underrated, really good player. Came into the year as like a BB plus, really good player who never gets credit for being as good as he is, and has played his way to like stardom right now. Is he really as good as he's been this year? I think the power output has already calmed a little bit. It's down to a 197 ISO, hasn't hit a home run in a few weeks. I believe the hard hits are very real. I believe that the average is pretty real. The on base is real. The run creation skills are real. I really, really like Yandy Diaz as a player. Like I've told you guys before, he's on, I think, like 25 out of those 30 season-long teams that I drafted. So I like him a lot as a player. I've gotten a ton out of him this year. I don't know that he continues hitting home runs at the output he was earlier in the season. I think, like I said, that's already cooled. But the price is still okay for him. 4,900 is not that expensive for what he's done and who he really is, let alone who he's been. 3,800 is, high on FanDuel, but at least you get him at two positions, first base and third base. So you can easily go to Diaz. Franco and Arozarena are stars, actual stars. Paredes, been great this year. Jose Siri's been great this year. Josh Lowe's been really good this year. Taylor Walls, Christian Bethancourt, all these guys have been good, top to bottom. So tons of multi-position eligibility, by the way, on FanDuel. Fair prices on the back end of the lineup. Fair prices on Raley. So for as much as I like Bryce Miller, as much as it's a pitcher's park, a matchup that I think favors pitching a little bit, I will definitely go to some Rays stacks to answer my shares of Miller. If I get to like 10% Miller, I'll have a decent handful of Rays stacks on the other side of it. With that, let me jump back over to chat. I haven't checked out chat in a little while. Chuck says KC's home road strikeout rate versus both hands is absurd. It was last season too. It's nearly an 8 to 10% swing. Wonder if that's an approach thing or is there more to it? Deep dive, it's a large sample. Haven't really looked at that specifically, but that's an interesting note. I will. Mama says, Terry, you know what my question is? Who is SP2, Canning or Kramer? I think I prefer the spot for Kramer in terms of the potential for strikeout upside. A little bit better of a matchup for Kramer. So let's get over to the board. That's a good way to tie into the pitching board overall. Yeah, Jake Swells. John D's a strong-ass dude. Tough at-bat no matter what pitcher he's facing. Absolutely. Really like him. Ignore Alec Marsh up at the top. Don't get a projection for him because he's not on the FanDuel slate. But I think at 4,000, there's at least a little bit of first start debut viability there. But it's a brutally bad matchup. So to answer that question about SP2 projection-wise, we've got Kramer here. Who was the other option? Canning. And Canning here. I think they're probably equal talents, generally pitching around the same level, but I just like the strikeout upside in Minnesota's lineup so much better for Kramer than the strikeout limiting opponent that Griff Canning's got to get through. This lineup feeds you strikeouts. This lineup takes them away. So just on that, I think you're going Dean Kramer. You're also getting him at a little bit better of a price. So if I'm looking for an SP2 exclusively between those two guys, I think that's the way I go. Top of the board, I don't disagree with the model at all in these two guys. I'll have loads of both of those guys. I think they're totally viable. Paxton, I'm a little bit concerned about the knee acting up and coming out of the game early again. 10-1, 10-3 is a difficult price, but I expect he'll be pretty low owned in a matchup against Toronto. I definitely want to get to some Toronto bats with all their home run hitting upside, their lack of strikeouts in that lineup. So it's kind of a limiting factor for Paxton, but he still does project well. Got to roll the dice with it, I think. I'm not looking at it as a safe play, but I'm looking at it as one that I think I'll have at least some of. I think maybe the way my sorting process works, especially with where Pablo's projected, where Freddie's projected for their prices, it'll probably help me get away from some of that Paxton, and then I might have to nudge like a John Gray into the conversation. Miller will probably get there in my sorting process a little bit to take away some of those Paxton shares. So it might land me about where I want to be on Paxton. But I think he's got viability, and in a full start, he's got upside. He could go out there and put up a very good strikeout performance, even against that star-studded Blue Jays lineup. So that's a potential inflection point and kind of a weird spot on this slate. Peralta, I mentioned, has obvious warts this season, has given up weird power this season, has been strange output in terms of lower strikeout rate, but getting more whiffs on his key pitches. It's very strange for Freddie, but the matchup's good. Pittsburgh without Brian Reynolds is a good spot. 92 is the right price, 97. Warts and all, I think we're in on Freddie again. Severino, I don't really buy the projection there. Like I said, kind of short on the innings, hasn't been striking people out, hasn't been finding swinging strikes. I'm concerned about that Severino spot. I'll have less of him than this projection and price would suggest. I don't think he's off the board because if he gives you 6 innings, I think you're getting there, especially at those prices. But it's a tough ask for Severino in the matchup too. John Gray, I fully believe in right around here at that in that matchup against Houston. Bryce Miller, fully believe in right around there in that matchup against Tampa Bay, although that's probably a little bit shakier ground in terms of do I trust John Gray more versus Bryce Miller, who is a premium pitching prospect but a lot less experienced against a very good lineup. I probably trust John Gray situationally a little bit more. So the gun to my head on two guys projected within a very marginal amount of fantasy points to each other would probably lean John Gray. Prefer Bobby Miller to Liberatore against the Yankees. I could see a little bit of viability for Liberatore at price, but he's just never done it at this level. So I would probably be more inclined to just skip him. I could see it, but I don't believe that it's going to happen. Miller, definitely I like. Dean Kramer, we just talked about, definitely I like. Carrasco, no belief, no faith. Alex Cobb, I like at his price. It's probably, if I was drawing a line, it'd be right about there. I think we're probably, and we could eliminate Carrasco, we could eliminate Liberatore, could probably eliminate Sevy. That's probably like the base pitching pool. On a different slate, Ronel Blanco would be relevant. I could see Soroka working his way to relevance. I could see Griff Canning working his way to relevance. Maybe Osvaldo Bido. Out of the guys at the bottom, and Jose Barrios as well on the right night. Out of the guys at the bottom, those are probably your options. And it's probably, if I had to pick one of those guys, since I don't trust Soroka for strikeouts, and I'm not sure what version of him we're getting, if I had to pick a guy below Alex Cobb, it's probably Jose Barrios, despite the bad matchup against Boston. Just more ability, more length, more experience there. Griff Canning would probably be too, but I don't like the matchup. Jake says, I don't mean to get back to Gomber because he definitely stinks, but how much more do you like Lorenzen in the same game? Not much more, because I don't really like either one of them. They're both just not really getting there for me. And I see a little bit of upside and viability for the Rockies, given the higher level of talent with Chris Bryant coming back with Nolan Jones in that lineup now. It's just not really a big spot at all for me. Yeah, Dennis puts it well. Do I like hitting my thumb with a hammer or stepping on a Lego? It's about right. It's about how I see that spot. Thanks for putting a button on that for me, Den. All right. I think that's about it, gang. 6:02. Got to get some lineups built. Get some entries into this contest. Good luck out there tonight. Somebody go win something. Let me know about it when you do. I don't care if you shout it out for rotoscouts, but you can. I don't care if the logo's on it, but you can. Hit the like button for me on this show. Make sure you're jumping into our Discord. A lot of good stuff going on over there. Make sure you're checking out the site. Follow the Twitter handle at rotoscouts. My other one's at digitalb21. That's just like me. The other one's the site one, obviously. So follow that, retweet, like, all those good things that help out social media stuff. But most importantly, good luck. Go win something. That's all I really care about. I want you guys to do well here. Somebody knock something down. I'm out of here. I'm hitting the end broadcast button. See you guys. Good luck.